Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto trained at a young age to become a puppet master part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. October the 10th, a day in the ninja village Konohagakure no Sato where the villagers celebrate a great victory and mourn the loss of their greatest hero and leader. For 6 years ago, the Yondaime Hokage Namikaze Minato defeated one of the 9 great demon lords, the Kyuubi no Kitsune, who was destroying their village. The battle lasted for weeks, from when the giant fire-colored fox with 9 tails intruded on Konoha's territory to until when he was stopped on the very outskirts of the village. Installing the demon, though, many hundred of good shinobi lost their lives, families were broken, children were orphaned, homes were destroyed. It was a time of both extreme tragedy and celebration, for in the defeat of the unstoppable force that was the 9-tailed demon lord and strongest of the tailed beasts, Kyuubi. This day was also the day in which a great tragedy had befallen on a certain infant, an infant who wasn't even aware of what was going on around him. An infant who the Yondaime used to defeat the demon lord once and for all, and it was because of this that the Yondaime forfeit any possible chance for the child to have a future in the village. One may ask why this was the case. Any person, especially an infant that aided in the defeat of Konoha's greatest foe, would surely be heralded as a hero, wouldn't they? Sadly, things were not meant to be. For the truth of the matter is that no human, or mortal for that matter, could possibly kill the Kyuubi no Kitsune outright with any skill they could possess. They simply lacked the power and the means to destroy an immortal body. So, how could the Yondaime, greatest shinobi to have been produced in Konoha, have killed the Kyuubi? He didn't, not in the literal terms anyway. The Yondaime, prior to his victory, spent an entire week trying to discover a way to slay the beast. But when he realized that there was no way to do so, he turned to his field of expertise, fuinjutsu or seals. It is common knowledge that seals are used to contain and hold things mainly, and it was with that idea the Yondaime invented a most fearsome technique that would put an end to the Kyuubi's reign of terror. The technique, Shiki Fujin, was designed to call upon the services of Shinigami itself, the death god, to use its powers to tear the soul of the target and user from their bodies. The target's soul can be placed into any seal requested, while the user's soul is devoured into the stomach of the death god as payment for its services, where it will reside to do battle with its fellow souls for all eternity. With the use of this technique, the Yondaime ripped the soul of the Kyuubi from its body, destroying him physically, and sealed it into the only thing that could possibly contain such a monstrous spirit. Something so pure and innocent that it would be immune to the corruption the soul of a demon could bring, so long as said demon could not influence its host in any way. The Yondaime sealed the soul of the Kyuubi no Kitsune into an orphan whose mother died after giving birth and father died in battle with the enraged Kitsune. The infant's name was Uzumaki Naruto, the human sacrifice used to destroy the Kyuubi and save Konoha from definite annihilation. Before using the child as a sacrifice, the Yondaime had one last request: for Uzumaki Naruto to be seen as a hero, the very thing that stops the village from being destroyed, the very person whose mere existence is a reminder of why they are still walking, talking, loving, caring, and basically living now. Naruto's body was used as the prison for the most notorious prisoner Konoha had ever seen, and he was the warden. There is a famous saying that says that 2 things are infinite: the universe and human stupidity, and I'm not so sure about the universe, and sadly, that statement couldn't be more accurate to describe Konoha's general reaction to the sealing of Kyuubi inside Naruto. Instead of valuing their beloved leader's knowledge and seals, skill and final wish, they instead transferred their hate of the demon to the next logical choice, the boy who contained it. Instead of seeing him as hero, who sacrificed his very own body to keep them alive, they saw him as the demon reincarnated who would wait until they are unprepared to pounce and finish the job it started on that fateful night, all those years ago. It was so bad that immediately after it was leaked out to the public about Naruto's condition, the nurse who was caring for the newly orphaned child attempted to kill it to finish the Yondaime's work by strangulation. Luckily for Naruto, the Sandaime Hokage, who was newly reinstated as the leader of the village after his predecessor's death, arrived on the scene and arrested the nurse, only to cause more civil uprising for arresting an innocent civilian who only tried to kill the demon. It got to the point that Sarutobi, the aged Hokage, had to pass a law before the council that forbade mentioning the Kyuubi being sealed in Naruto on the punishment of death. This was in hopes that the villagers would leave the poor boy alone so that he could at least make friends in his own generation. That, too, was not to be. In his early years, Uzumaki Naruto lived in an orphanage where the caretakers would allow for the other children to beat on him, even indulging in on the activity themselves when they were sure the Sandaime would not notice. Parents would admonish their children for trying to include the monster in their games, to the point where the children began to hate him too for getting them into trouble with their parents. In fact, in the whole village, it seemed that the only person who truly cared for the abused child was the Sandaime Hokage, though others chose ignorance as a better way to deal with the problem, even if they don't think ill of him. Eventually, on his 4th birthday, Naruto was kicked out of the orphanage when the caretakers believed he was more trouble than he was worth. He had spent months on the streets scrounging from trash cans to survive until Sandaime found him and purchased him an apartment, while giving him an allowance so that he wouldn't die on the street, a small mercy for the boy Kami himself forgot about. Naruto grew up with the hate of his home while at the same time, not knowing what he had done to earn such hate. Such a life caused him naturally become reserved, mistrustful, intelligent and cunning. One cannot live like he did and survive without having these traits. Things began to look up for Naruto though when with his allowance, he found a shop whose owner treated him like a person and sold him food. Ichiraku Ramen, owned by Tuchi Ichiraku and his daughter Ayame Ichiraku, offered Naruto a safe haven to eat with the money he was given by Sandaime, if for nothing else than to feel loved and cared for. It was on his 6th birthday though when Naruto's life would turn upside down. He had gotten used to hiding on October the 10th, his birthday, for the villagers seemed to be extra angry with him on that day, where the beating he received would be at their worst. However, as he hid under his bed in the old, broken-down apartment which had graffiti sprayed all over the walls with vulgar language and insults toward him, broken windows and appliances, dirty and unsanitary water and spoiled food in his fridge, his apartment door was broken down by a group of drunk villagers, drunk from the celebration of the festival held annually to honor the dead and celebrate the Kyuubi's defeat. In a large group, Naruto heard them break down his door and enter his apartment. It didn't take long for them to overturn his bed and find him hiding, where they then proceeded to beat him, breaking several bones in his young body, stab him with broken bottles, tie him up and drag him around the village while the other villagers cheered and egged them on. This all ended when they got to the outskirts of the village and tied him up on a tree branch and proceeded to use him as a human piñata for a few hours before leaving him for dead. How could it be that all this atrocious behavior could be allowed to happen right under the nose of the very Hokage who seemed to care for his well-being? That was simple. At the very same time, a delegate from the hidden village in the clouds, Kumogakure no Sato, attempted to kidnap the Hyuga heiress, which required the attention of all the elite shinobi of Konoha, taking the attention away from Naruto for long enough for him to be beat to death. But no, death would not come to Naruto, for even though having the great demon sealed within him was a great curse, he was also blessed with gifts such as an abnormally large chakra supply, increased stamina, a perfectly fit body even though he should technically have died through malnutrition, and enhanced healing. For the Kyuubi's spirit was tied with Naruto's own, and the prideful demon would not have his container dying at the hands of mere civilians, not this day. It was this sight that the legendary Akasuna no Sasori, missing nin of Sunigakure no Sato and legendary puppeteer, found Uzumaki Naruto while he was attempting to infiltrate Konoha and get one of his spies to steal the forbidden scroll of seals from the Hokage's library. "What the hell is this?" asked a confused and horrified Sasori, as his large crouched body covered by a black cloak with red clouds adorned on it approached the seemingly dead boy being hung upside down from a tree branch with enough injuries to suggest he was tortured. Underneath the branch he was hung from, there was a massive pool of blood gathered, most likely from his wounds. What was confusing and unsettling though was the amount of blood there was though. Someone of his stature knows a lot of the human anatomy, and one thing he knew was that there was no way there could be that much blood within this small body. He approached it more closely to examine the boy, poking him a few times to realize he was still warm and had a pulse when he gasped upon realization of who it was. "This is the Kyuubi Jinchuriki," he asked himself as he traced the 3 whisker marks on each cheek with his hand. "These pathetic village of monsters can justify treat a child like this. And I'm a wanted criminal for turning a tyrant of a Kazekage into a puppet." Thanking Kami that it was physically impossible for him to vomit at the gruesome sight, a large metal tail rose from within his robes and shot out at the rope keeping the boy suspended, severing it, as he dropped into Sasori's waiting arms. "He is a sitting duck out here," thought Sasori. "Leader-sama will have found him eventually without trouble, and then these leaf fools would have caused their very own end again. I need to hide him where he'll be safe." Using what very little medical techniques he knew to at least seal his wounds so he would stop bleeding and leave a trail, he then cleaned him of all the dried blood on his body and wrapped him up in his cloak before leaving Konoha with Naruto, forgetting about his original goal for coming to Konoha. Naruto let out a groan when he regained consciousness. The last thing he could remember was being tied up and hung from a tree. By all means, he should be dead. Instead, he found himself lying face up on a hard surface with a small source of warmth coming from somewhere to his right. Looking straight up and opening his dull cerulean eyes, he saw what looked to be the roof of a cave, a dark cave. Sitting up, he saw that he was indeed in a large cave sitting by a fire while lying down on a pile of large leaves and torn out grass fashioned into an uncomfortable bed. The cave had numerous stalagmites and stalactites on the edges of the cave, leaving the middle wide open where there was some sort of workbench against the wall with numerous medical-looking tools and drills along with several scrolls strewn about carelessly on the desk. Suddenly, a shadow was cast over the cave and whipping his head around, he saw a strange thing. It was hunched over, seemingly in a crouch with a black bandana covering his face. Its white eyes seemingly looking at him silently while the rest of its large body was covered by a black cloak with red clouds. "You're awake," he commented in a disemboweled voice, sounding deep and rusty yet with no malice or no other emotion either. Naruto just nodded, looking at the weird-looking man warily, who just nodded and shuffled over to the fire before placing down a dead boar probably for them to eat. "What's your name?" asked the man, taking off his cloak to reveal the most bizarre body Naruto had ever seen. On his back there was an orange mask-like shell with a large metal scorpion-like tail protruding from the mouth, while his left arm had some sort of gauntlet on it, covering the seemingly wooden appendage. After he removed his straw hat, he revealed braided hair that really made him look bizarre and creepy. It was what he did next that nearly made the young and impressionable boy faint. A hissing sound came from his chest area as a small latch opened to reveal a door as a boy of no older than 15 or 16 stepped out. This boy seemed to be less weird, having good-looking pale features and messy red hair. He also had a black cloak with red clouds on it. "Well?" he asked again in a much more regular voice, losing that robotic edge it previously held. "Uzumaki Naruto," he answered, without much emotion in his voice either, before he pulled his legs up to his chest and hugged his knees, huddling by the fire. The red-haired boy seemed to take this in stride and proceeded to the fire so he could cook the boar he caught. The smell it gave off as it cooked made Naruto's stomach grumble, showing his hunger, though either said anything about it. "Who are you?" asked Naruto, with a slight waver in his voice, letting Sasori know that he was still upset of what must have happened before he ended up in the condition he was in when he found him. "I am known as Akasuna no Sasori. I am a ninja," he answered, satisfying Naruto's curiosity for the moment. "What did you just do before with your body?" asked Naruto, after a few more moments of silence. Sasori seemed to ponder whether he was going to answer or not before doing so. "As a shinobi, I am a puppeteer. I use my techniques to control puppets to fight my enemies." "That over there," he said, pointing to the body he seemingly shed, "is Hiriko, one of my puppets that I control from the inside that allows me to protect myself from attacks while being able to attack at the same time," answered Sasori honestly, not thinking the boy would understand anyway. Sasori was shocked to say the least when Naruto spoke up anyway, giving his own thoughts. "You use chakra to control your puppets and the tail then? That way you can control your puppets without worrying about getting attacked yourself while doing so, right?" Sasori was shocked, though you wouldn't be able to tell from his stoic facial features. This boy was what? 5? 6? And he easily understood the reasoning for Hiriko after just one small explanation. "Correct." Naruto, still hugging his knees though now looking at the discarded Hiriko, spoke up again. "No one in Konoha uses puppets as a shinobi technique. It would save chakra one would normally waste for ninjutsu to use to enhance your own limbs and chakra strings. Instead, I don't see why there are not more puppeteers." If the situation wasn't so sad, Sasori would have burst out laughing. Trust a child to see the advantages and wonders of using puppets so easily. "You are interested in the shinobi arts?" asked Sasori, with a curious tone. "I read a lot. It's all I was allowed to do," answered Naruto. Sasori didn't interrupt, wanting to hear the whole story. "I spent a lot of time in the library, though I wasn't allowed to take any of the books. I like reading the stories about Shodame-sama, Naidame-sama, Sandame-sama, Yandame-sama, and other ninja villages. It was interesting." "Do you know who I am?" asked Sasori, genuinely curious, and his curiosity was piqued even more when Naruto nodded. "You're an S-class missing nin from Sunigakure no Sato, wanted for stealing several top-secret jutsu scrolls and fleeing Sunigakure over a decade ago." Silence lapsed between the two that lasted for at least 10 minutes as Sasori served the boar to the now starving Naruto and a cup of water from a bucket near the entrance of the cave, which was collecting clean drinking water. "You're not scared?" asked Sasori, while they ate their meals, to which Naruto just snorted in amusement. "Of what? You could beat me, try to kill me, spit on me, and you would probably still be kinder than the villagers back in Konoha. No, I'm not scared. I got over being scared a long time ago," answered Naruto truthfully, sounding much older than he really was. Sasori nodded and continued to watch Naruto eat, not eating anything himself. When Naruto had his fill, Sasori took out a scroll, painted some kanji on it with a seal brush before applying chakra to the scroll, which then enveloped the leftover food in a blue light and made it vanish. "Why?" spoke up Naruto suddenly, and Sasori understood immediately what he was talking about, even though he used one word to voice his thoughts. "I work for an organization called Akatsuki, a group of S-rank missing nin whose goals are to collect the 9 great demon lords for the sole purpose to use them to monopolize the shinobi world and remove the need for hidden villages. Had I not taken you, someone from my organization not like me would have found you and killed you to take the demon you hold prisoner for their own uses." Seeing the shock on Naruto's face, then resignation, Sasori continued, from your reaction, it's to my understanding that you did not know you housed the demon inside you. The story your village teaches its new shinobi is a lie. The Yondaime did defeat the Kyuubi, but he did so by sealing his soul into an infant's body, yours. Impressed that the child hadn't broken down crying by now, he was about to continue when Naruto snorted, I guess it's better than thinking I was hated for no reason. They hate me because I'm the Kyuubi. Sasori showed his first sign of emotion by sneering, don't be stupid boy, the Kyuubi no Kitsune was a demon of infinite power, one no mortal could kill. You are not the Kyuubi no Kitsune, but merely its jailer. Just like a scroll that has a sealed kanai, and it is not a kanai, but a scroll. There is a name for someone like you, it is a Jinchuriki, power of the human sacrifice, fitting if the condition I found you in 2 nights ago was anything to go by. Naruto sat in silence, digesting all the new information he was given by Sasori while staring into the cackling fire with emotionless eyes. It was a relief to know that at least he was hated for a reason out of his control. He had assumed that he had done something unimaginable that he could not remember. To know that they were the ones mistaken and not he comforted him somewhat. I guess you're going to hand me into your superiors to get the Kyuubi then. How long do I have? Asked Naruto, with no fear at all, simply resignation. I never said I would do that, Sasori said, while he too stared into the fire. I merely joined Akatsuki for its protection. I do not share their goals for the shinobi world. However, I also don't care for hidden villages and how they tie down their shinobi either. I will not be responsible for the death of an innocent child such as yourself though, so you will remain here where you are safe for now, answered Sasori, shocking Naruto somewhat. Where is here? Asked Naruto finally, after several moments of shocked silence. This cave is where I work on my puppets and other creations. We are near the border of Wind Country, hidden by a powerful genjutsu at the entrance of the cave, he answered. What am I supposed to do? I doubt you'll be here the whole time if you work for an organization. Sasori nodded. What do you want to do? Aside from visiting the surrounding villages, that is, doing so as you are now is a surefire way for you to get caught and sent back to that pitiful village. Naruto asked himself that question now. What did he want to do? It's obvious that if he went back to Konoha by force or by will, he would most likely be lynched again by the villagers. If he went to any other village, now knowing that he had the Kyuubi in him, it probably wouldn't take long for them to realize it too and use him for it, so any hidden village is out of the question. That didn't stop him from wanting to become a shinobi though. He had no reason to become one though other than to protect himself. That wasn't great motivation to become strong, and progress for the sake of progress would just make him bored quickly. He then had images of the Sandaime Hokage and the Ichiraku ramen family flash through his mind before he smirked slightly. I want to be a shinobi, answered Naruto, which made Sasori raise an eyebrow in amusement. Then let Konoha capture you again, they'll let you become one eventually, he answered, wanting to goad a reaction out of him, which he did. Naruto's cold eyes met his own, shining with fierce determination. I don't want to go back to Konoha or any other hidden village either, they'll just use me. I still want to be strong though. Sasori picked up a stick and poked the fire while thinking about this last predicament. Though he wasn't terribly fond of the boy or anything, it would give him some way to pass the time when he wasn't doing missions with Akatsuki, not to mention that if he decided to train Naruto personally, he could make sure he was strong enough to resist them when they finally discover his identity and try to abduct him. He was not crazy, nor warmongering, he just hated being tied down by the rules and laws of a hidden village, preferring the life of a missing nin. Should Akatsuki get a hold of this boy though, and the rest of the tailed demons, war would be the only possible outcome, and though he was not particularly adverse to the idea, it would also escalate to the level where innocents would die, and he couldn't have that. I will leave often, for days, weeks, maybe even months, but if I chose to train you, will you listen to my every order in regards to it, or will you be an insolent child whining about not wanting to work for strength? Questioned Sasori. My training will not be easy, in fact, it will be grueling and taxing on you at the best of times, but to learn what I have to teach you, you will need precise control of your chakra, excellent stamina, high speed and high intelligence, all of which will require a lot of work on your behalf. Are you prepared? Naruto smiled a small smile for the first time since Sasori took him from Konoha, which made him smirk back. Hi Sasori-sensei, answered Naruto, which made Sasori look up to the ceiling with a faraway look. Sasori-sensei? I like the sound of that. The Sandaime Hokage of Konoha, known by most as Sarutobi-sama or Old Man by his son and grandson, sighed as he looked over his paperwork. Being Hokage may seem like a glorious and illustrious thing to be, why wouldn't it? To be revered across the shinobi nations as the strongest Kage of them all and have the love and respect of your village, what's wrong with that? It was days like today that made him question himself as he wondered if everything he did was worth it. His job was to be the shield of Konoha, protecting its inhabitants so they could live happily and peacefully, and he failed miserably, No, miserable didn't even come close to how bad he screwed up in regards to a certain blonde-haired blue-eyes Jinchuriki. When he heard the reports that Hyuga Hinata had been kidnapped by the delegate of Cloud during the QB festival, he had dedicated the entirety of the ANBU force, the special group of shinobi that answer only to the Hokage and do the most important jobs, to search and retrieve. It seemed that such an action was completely unnecessary as the Hyuga head, Hyuga Hayashi, intercepted the kidnapper before he could leave the village and dealt with him swiftly, which would have its own repercussions in its own, but it was his naivety and close-mindedness that led to the death of Uzumaki Naruto. When he was discovered missing by complete accident when Tsuchi Ichiraka had informed him that Naruto had not come to his store in 3 whole days, which was a matter of concern since it was the only place in the village he could get food without being poisoned, he had organized a full-scale search only to find a puddle of his dried-up blood on the outskirts of the village with a cut rope. The sight had immediately made him sick to his stomach. There was so much blood and a trail of said blood leading into the forest. Animals must have taken him away after he was beaten by the villagers, no doubt, and finished the job. There was, of course, a full-scale investigation as to who was responsible for such a dreadful act, but when the reports came back, it was so many people that he couldn't possibly punish them all without having a civil war on his hands by doing so, so the murderers of said child were set free, with absolutely no punishment. Not that majority of the council cared. Ignorant fools. The reports officially said that he is dead, body most likely devoured by animals, but Sarutobi knew better. He wasn't Hokage for nothing after all. He had seen the Kyuubi's effect on Naruto in terms of its healing powers on its container. He knew that next to decapitation, or the destroying of a vital organ, there wasn't many injuries that would kill the boy, blood loss being one of them. He knew for a fact that Uzumaki Naruto was still out there somewhere. Perhaps it was for the best. All he could hope for is that he not return stronger seeking vengeance, because with the power he could wield at his disposal, he could very easily do that, and he was very tempted to let him do so. Naruto's first week of training had been difficult to say the least, but he never complained once. Sasori-sensei wouldn't appreciate that. He had told Naruto from the beginning that it would be difficult and he would want to hear no complaints, and Naruto had been the one who requested it in the first place. Who was he to complain? Sasori had told him from the beginning that he was training Naruto to be stronger than him, for his organization would eventually come after him, and to be able to defend himself, he would need to be stronger than Sasori, for he himself was not the strongest member of the organization. Sasori had disappeared on the first night before Naruto went to bed, only to be back by morning with the supplies he would need to begin his training. He was to at first increase his speed, stamina, chakra reserves, and most importantly chakra control. The control aspect was most important because Sasori-sensei told him that due to the seal placed on Naruto's stomach, it is constantly converting Kyuubi's chakra into his own, giving him abnormally large reserves for someone his age, and if large reserves weren't hard enough to control, the type of chakra that is being flooded into his system is causing an imbalance. Chakra was split up into 2 components, physical and spiritual. Seeing as the Kyuubi was a massive spirit sealed within his body, its power is also spiritual, and though adding to his reserves, it only adds to his spiritual chakra reserves, leaving less of the physical component, thus causing an imbalance, and thus making his control horrible when he tried to exercise his control by focusing it to his feet and trying to stick to a tree. To remedy this, Sasori had told him that he would have to fix the balance, but it would take hard work. When he completed the incredibly hard task of fixing the balance, though, he would be all the stronger for it. Apparently, there were only 2 ways to do this in Sasori's opinion. One was to seal off Kyuubi's chakra for good, so that the physical component of his chakra could catch up, or the more viable option, to train hard physically by doing physical exercises not involving chakra to increase their supplies quicker than the spiritual component of his chakra was increasing. This would require him to do intensive physical workouts until the balance was there, which he could then combine the 2 components in his training and increase them evenly. The end result would be Naruto having massive reserves and perfect control of them, a deadly combination of any powerful shinobi, and something Sasori told Naruto he would need if he wanted to learn what he had to teach him. To begin his training, Sasori had given him a workout regimen that was designed to increase his physical stamina, which involved lots of running, minor physical exercises, and swimming for several hours each day. Being that he needed speed too, Sasori-sensei told him that he could not pack on too much muscle, else he becomes bulky and slow instead of strong, fast, and agile. To remedy this, Sasori-sensei had him only do exercises that increased his stamina, as once he attained good enough control, he could use his chakra to augment his speed and strength. It had taken him a full week to get used to the harsh training exercises, which usually consisted of laps around a specific circuit near the cave, sit-ups, push-ups, crunches, squats, and all other forms of physical exercise before he went on to shuriken and kunai throwing, followed by learning things that Sasori-sensei deemed beneficial to all shinobi like mathematics, strategy, history, economics, and meditation. The latter more so he could focus and relax more often to keep his emotions bottled up when around his enemy. Show your enemy the slightest weakness, and they will exploit if they are good shinobi, he had told Naruto on many occasions, to drill it into his head. Over the next 2 years, Sasori continued to train Naruto in his chakra control and building his stamina to the point where his control was at a level high enough to begin the next phase of his training. As his reserve naturally grew, he had also began to teach him some ninjutsu that he had pilfered from various villages that would complement his abilities, such as the Shunshin technique, various clone techniques, and the basic academy-level techniques like the Henge and Kawarini, which he mastered quickly and efficiently. Sasori had also begun to teach him about poisons and the human anatomy, so he could utilize his knowledge about poisons and where to strike his opponents to cause the most damage. The blonde was so naturally talented in the field, he created his own technique, to Sasori's shock, that was incredibly ingenious. The technique was called Doku Bunshin, which, like the Kage Bunshin that creates a solid clone of the user with the use of the user's chakra, creates a clone of the creator, but unlike others, upon destruction, it lets loose a cloud of poison that will likely be ingested by the attacker. To create it, he had combined the principles of the Kage Bunshin and Bunshin Daibakuha techniques, only instead of an explosion when the clone was destroyed, he used chakra to create poison. Naruto, stop training and come here, we have much to discuss, spoke Sasori to Naruto, who was currently doing his daily exercises. He may have grown fond of the boy, who was a pleasure to teach, but he would not baby the boy or grow soft, it would not help either of them. Yes, Sasori-sensei? Asked Naruto with a calm if not curious look on his face. He had been a bit excitable at the beginning of their training, but Sasori immediately beat that out of him. It was unbecoming of a shinobi to act like a child of all things. You have progressed a lot quicker in your training than I had expected, thus, we will move on to the next phase that I believe you will enjoy. As a result, he began, cold and emotionless as always. Seeing Naruto nod, he continued. What can you tell me of shinobi techniques? Inquired Sasori, allowing Naruto to figure out what they would be training in next by leading the answer to him with a line of questions. Well, there are many types of shinobi techniques which can either use one's physical stamina or chakra to perform. Such examples are ninjutsu, taijutsu, genjutsu, kenjutsu, fuinjutsu, and so on. One either learns stances and trains to master taijutsu and kenjutsu, but normally, in regards to techniques, one would mold chakra in the way they desire to have the desired effect of the technique they tried to use, Naruto answered, as best as he could remember, earning a nod from Sasori. Basing your next answer on your training so far, what do you think I would like you to train in next? Asked Sasori, goading him for an answer. You have tried hard to make sure that my control is as perfect as possible. First and foremost, Naruto answered before pausing, you have also tried to sharpen my mind and increase my intellectual power, so I would guess that you want me to learn genjutsu? With a nod, Sasori decided to explain his decision. Genjutsus are extremely complicated ninjutsu that use that focus on using the chakra in your opponent's nervous system to manipulate their senses to your liking, allowing you to create phantasms that can cause your opponent to hear, see, taste, smell, and or feel whatever you like. It is extremely difficult and deadly, but once mastered, you can defeat your opponents without using as much chakra as a regular ninjutsu technique, would he explain to the amazed Naruto. Naruto then had a frown on his face before answering. Couldn't someone who is extremely skilled just disable the genjutsu and make it useless? Asked Naruto, and Sasori nodded, conceding the point. Indeed, but the main factor there is that will only happen if your opponent is more skilled than you, which we are trying to make sure will not happen. Genjutsu is about subtlety more than power, he began. You can also layer your genjutsu so that you can make it more difficult for them to break, or detect at all. Even though one can disrupt a genjutsu by using the release technique or flaring their chakra, they must know they're in a genjutsu first, or have the sufficient skill to break out of it. Do you understand its uses? With a grin, Naruto nodded. How will I learn this, sensei? Asked Naruto, showing an excitement that Sasori only saw on the boy whenever he would teach him something new. That was why it was so easy to teach the boy. He would soak up everything he would teach him like a sponge, but he would also enjoy it. Teaching genjutsu isn't like teaching ninjutsu. I do not show you a technique and you use it. What the genjutsu masters do is create their own techniques and manipulate the chakra in their opponents so flawlessly. They can literally manipulate their opponents at will. I will allow you to practice this on me for a few hours every day I am here. The other times I am not. You will train mentally so you can have the focus to perform the techniques, he answered, smirking at Naruto's giddy expression. Most kids his age would usually act like this when they got a toy they wanted, or were taken to buy some ice cream, but Naruto would only act like this when he got to learn something new. I should tell you, he began, that there is a certain individual in the organization I work for who is a master at using genjutsu, mostly because of his bloodline limit, began Sasori, immediately getting Naruto's attention. His name is Uchiha Itachi, and his Sharingan allows him to have such a masterful control over genjutsu that he can sometimes perform them without the use of hand seals to mold chakra. It is one of the reasons why I am teaching you this. You will need this knowledge if you are to survive against him, explained Sasori. Why are you so certain that I will be fighting him in the future, sensei? Asked the confused Naruto, which was only answered by a pregnant pause by Sasori. Uchiha Itachi and Hashige Kisame have been assigned to gather intelligence on, locate, and capture you, or rather the Kyuubi no Kitsune inside of you, answered Sasori truthfully. To his surprise though, Naruto just got an extremely determined look in his eyes. I may not have the Sharingan, but I will find a way to be better than the Uchiha. You said so yourself that as long as I'm better, my genjutsu will work, right? Sharingan or not, if I am better, he will have a hard time dealing with them and I should be able to disable his. I will find a way to do so, sensei, he spoke, with fierce determination, making Sasori smirk. Oh Itachi-san, Kisame-san, you will hate me for all of eternity for this, but I can't bring myself to care, mused Sasori as he nodded and began to train Naruto in earnest now, for the first time going one-on-one, as his previous training didn't require much contact between the two, only books and instructions. To begin with, Sasori showed Naruto one of the low-level genjutsu techniques he knew and used it on him to aid. This would help him in a number of ways because firstly, he could feel how the chakra is being manipulated within himself, he can see it in effect and he can practice to break it. As Sasori guessed, Naruto was able to piece together the steps involved in casting a genjutsu by himself after a week of this and successfully replicated the effect that was cast on himself, which was creating a phantasm for Sasori to see. Once Naruto got the feeling of how to manipulate the chakra to replicate those effects, he had to find a way to practice on someone to further his training. He couldn't use it on Sasori because the only sense Naruto could possibly use against Sasori was his sight and hearing, the rest was rendered useless due to his puppet body. So, to compensate, Sasori allowed Naruto to go into nearby villages under a henge and practice his genjutsu skills on unsuspecting citizens and bandits. Using this method of practice, Naruto was able to get the hang of using genjutsu and their usefulness. However, try as he might, he could not do them without the use of hand seals. In an attempt to discover how chakra is molded easier, Sasori told him to first attempt the feat with ninjutsu by mere repetition. So, taking his advice, Naruto went back to training his ninjutsu again but would not move on to the next technique until he mastered his current one without the use of hand seals. A year had passed like this, and by his 9th birthday, Naruto was able to perform henge, kage bunshin, bunshin daibakuha, kawarimi, shunshin and doku bunshin without the use of hand seals, and mizu bunshin, tsuchi bunshin and a few lower-level genjutsus with just single-handed hand seals. No matter how hard he tried though, he could not do any higher-level genjutsu without the use of hand seals, even when using the training method he discovered with kage bunshin that allowed him to gain experience much faster by letting his clones participate with training and then assimilating their knowledge when they were finished. Sasori had told him that it would take years of experience until he was at that level, but he never was one to like being told he could not do something. A year of self-study with scrolls and practice on non-shinobi was all Naruto got when Sasori happened upon him training and interrupted him. You may not have mastered genjutsu in the way that you had hoped, but you have done so to an extent in the given time fat better than I had thought you would. I set you an unrealistic goal that would give you a determination to better yourself, began Sasori, while looking at Naruto's pleased expression. I am by no means telling you to stop this, but we will begin with the next thing I am willing to teach you, said the puppeteer, getting Naruto excited at the prospect of getting stronger. What I will personally be teaching you now is how to use chakra strings as best as possible, and thus, by extent, how to be an effective puppeteer in combat, he explained with a smirk as Naruto let out a whoop of joy. The boy had expressed an interest in learning the art ever since he had shown him his own designs. One must begin small though, so you will first be learning how to create and control chakra strings on each finger, and only then will we move to actual puppets, he explained as Naruto got into a seated position before Sasori, ready for teaching. With Naruto's excellent chakra control, it didn't take long for him to be able to learn to use chakra strings. Sasori began by telling him how to create them, by expelling chakra from his fingertips and controlling them with his mind. He practiced this control by using chakra strings to levitate kunai around his body, 1 at first, but it then proceeded to 10 at a time. Sasori had told Naruto that though he was getting better at it, he would need to be able to control his puppets and by extension chakra strings subconsciously, so that if he were to get distracted during a fight, the strings will not disengage, leaving his puppets useless. To do this, Sasori had Naruto dodging projectiles in all directions, while using his chakra to both stand on a lake and control 10 kunai with chakra strings. The kunai were also not to be hit by the projectiles, so he was forced to dodge with both his body and chakra strings. Essentially, the exercise was designed to get Naruto to act as if the strings and whatever they are attached to are an extension of his own body. The next part of the training involved Sasori bringing out 4 of his old created puppets for him and Naruto to spar with, which Sasori always won. The point of that exercise was not winning though, but rather learning strategy with puppets, as well as combining them with ninjutsu and stealth techniques. After Sasori was satisfied that after a good year of training with them Naruto had a good enough understanding and skill with using puppets in combat, he went more into theory, or more specifically, more advanced puppets. Naruto, it is time I told you where the true power of puppetry lies. This also will reveal to you why I am an exile of my village, began Sasori after a grueling puppet spar which Naruto was able to last for 2 hours in. The famous technique that I use in puppetry is the Hidokagetsu, or human puppet. The technique is exactly as it sounds too. It is the art of using the corpse of a deceased shinobi and turning them into a puppet that puppeteers like you can use. The process may seem grotesque, at best, but as long as it is not misused, there is no problem, explained Sasori, skipping the theory on how to make human puppets for now. I, unlike other missing nin, did not leave my home village of Sunagakure no Sato because I was forced, or committed a crime. I left because I wanted to. However, before I did leave, I assassinated the tyrant of Akazakage, the Sandaime, and took his body with me so I could create a human puppet out of him. The man was a menace and a danger to that village, so I doubt they really minded, all except for his more fanatical supporters anyway. He was a barbarian and a sick and twisted individual, allowing the more ruthless shinobi free reign on small villages to rape, pillage and murder innocents, even going so far as to indulge on such activities himself. When I realized this, I killed by slipping him an unrecognizable poisonous substance into his sake and taking him with me, he explained, satisfied to see how disgusted Naruto was by the revelation. A human puppet essentially, after it is created, retains the chakra, abilities and any bloodline limit they had in their life while still alive, but instead is controlled by the puppeteer, he said, seeing Naruto's eyes widen in shock. Indeed, I gather you see the potential of such a technique? The Sandaime Kazakage was famous for his ability to manipulate magnetic fields, and thus, his ultimate ability to control the iron sand, something that made him the most powerful Kage ever to grace Sunagakure regardless of how much of a monster he was, he explained emotionlessly, pausing to see if Naruto had any questions. How do you make them, and are they alive in any way, shape, or form after the puppet is created? Are they even aware at all? He asked, slightly nervous. To answer your second question first, began Sasori, no, absolutely not. The moment the person is dead, they are that, simply dead. The puppet works though by implementing devices within the body that preserves and maintains the chakra circulatory system. So, once all the entrails are removed, and the puppet completed, they are simply that, a puppet that can use chakra at your bidding. Seeing that Naruto still found it hard to understand, Sasori took out a scroll and summoned the puppet of the Sandaime Kazakage. Naruto looked on in awe at the floating human look-alike and was even more awed when Sasori commanded his puppet to shoot bullets of iron sand into the wall, just like the original could have. Naruto was grinning like mad before it turned into a frown as he thought of something. Sasori-sensei, what's the point of me learning the human puppet technique and how to create them when I don't have the corpse of a powerful shinobi to use? Asked a confused Naruto. Sasori in response actually chuckled darkly before pulling out 2 scrolls and throwing them at Naruto. You know who my partner is in Akatsuki, correct? Asked Sasori, after throwing the confused Naruto the 2 scrolls. Hi, Orochimaru, the serpent Sannin, answered Naruto immediately. S-class nuke nin from Konohagakure no Sato, banished for his experimentation on fellow Konoha citizens, answered Naruto, not seeing where this was going. Indeed, well, it seemed our serpentine friend stole and used the corpses of 2 very powerful shinobi, he began, making sure he had Naruto's attention. The Shodaime and Nidaime Hokages were buried in Konoha with a preservation jutsu placed on their bodies so that while in their tomb, their bodies will never decay. When Orochimaru was banished, he replaced those corpses with fakes that had henges placed on them and stole the originals. He did this so he could hopefully find a way to replicate their bloodline abilities, control over Mokuton techniques or masterful control over the Suiton techniques respectfully, he explained, as Naruto's eyes opened wide with shock when he realized where this was going as he changed the grip he had on the scrolls to something bordering reverence. He obviously failed, but he never returned the corpses. A spy of mine told me of this and I made him retrieve the corpses for me. I will teach you how to make a human puppet after we go through the adequate theory, and we will make one with the Nidaime's body first, then you will do the Shodaime's on your own. Better that way, as the Shodaime's bloodline ability would be more valuable, in all honesty, explained the puppeteer. Naruto didn't even think twice. Before Sasori even allowed Naruto to try the human puppets, he took the bodies back and informed Naruto that should he want to try his hand at making a human puppet, he had to create 3 of his own regular battle puppets before he would allow it, and he only had 1.5 years to do so. It may have sounded like a lot of time, but to Naruto, who was ordered to create 3 original puppets after seeing his sensei's humongous collection, this was a daunting task. Over the next year and a half, Naruto continued his training in genjutsu technique, stamina, speed and chakra control while he also drew the blueprints for and created his 3 original battle puppets Dokiki, Dorairu and Tenchi. Dokiki was a nimble puppet with a thin wooden body covered by a tattered gray cloak, 6 arms and 2 legs. Like its name suggests, its main weapons revolve around poisoning the enemy. Each of its arms has a specially made kunai launcher that held a contraption that could shoot poison-tipped kunai faster than most ninja could throw it. From the puppet's mouth, there was also a hidden contraption that could, on Naruto's command, release a highly dangerous poison that corrodes the insides of anyone who inhales it. Its most deadly weapon though was beneath the tattered cloak in its torso, which was several dozen poison blades that upon command, launch out from within the torso through the provided holes and into an opponent. The idea was that Dokiki would latch onto an enemy and then Naruto would release. The blades would shoot out from within quickly and withdraw, quicker than the eye could see but enough so that it could kill quite effectively. The second puppet he created, Dorairu, was more of a support and defensive puppet with limited offensive capabilities, yet quite useful all the same. The puppet was much larger than Dokiki, with its limbs being thicker and stronger, while it had long arms, strong legs and a huge drill for a head. Also, on its back resided a large crimson kabuki mask which was designed to act as a shield, though it was quite scary looking, which worked to put fear in his enemies. Its main attack revolved around getting an enemy within the almost impenetrable compartment in its chest, and uses the drill to bury underground where it would be highly unlikely for an opponent to escape. It also had a Saban launcher on its forearms, loaded with Saban laced with paralyzing poison, to aid in slowing the foe for easier capture. Unlike his other puppets, the torso of Dorairu was made of a lightweight yet durable metal, as to easily conduct electricity that could be created from the contraption on the palms of Dorairu's hands. Dorairu could either punch its foes, sending electrical shockwaves into the enemy's body, or it could pass electricity through its highly conductible body and roast the enemy within. His favorite and most genius puppet, however, was Tenchi. The puppet had 6 angel-like wings on the back that were designed to shoot poison saban from each feather, a high-powered flamethrower on each arm, a grenade launcher in its torso, and instead of legs, a large metallic and flexible tail that was also tipped with poison and quite strong so it could strike quickly at foes with it, defend, or bind. This puppet showed the most potential from attacking from the sky, letting loose grenades while remaining out of harm's way, or sending flames of death with its flamethrowers for arms. The Simban launchers on each of the 6 wings can be controlled to shoot Simban in 6 different directions. Essentially, Tenchi was wonderful against multiple foes with an excellent array of attacks. The materials to create the puppets were taken from Sasori's tool stash, and anything he wanted yet didn't have was purchased by Sasori. He had no idea where he would get such obscure items as a large drill or kabuki mask though. The end result had Sasori thrilled, and the field test was even better where Naruto made his first kill by raiding a bandit camp while controlling all 3 puppets simultaneously. He was a little sloppy and weak with controlling all 3 at once, but Sasori said that would get better with experience. Sasori had also made him mark his puppets like how he marked his own creations with his own mark, a red scorpion. Taking his sensei's advice to heart, he then marked all of his own puppets with his own sign, a crimson spiral, synonymous with his name. Getting the approval of his sensei in regards to being a proper puppeteer, they began their work on the theory behind creating human puppets, and it was quite grotesque yet fascinating at the same time. What it required was for Naruto to remove the entrails from the body and drain it of all its blood. Then, after peeling off the skin, numerous gadgets would be installed in the body to keep the chakra circulatory system running and retain the ex-shinobi's former powers. Sasori had to walk him through step by step after he was sure Naruto wouldn't throw up at the sight. When Naruto asked how he could stomach such a task so easily, Sasori just chuckled darkly and told him that he no longer had a stomach or any other human body parts because he too was a human puppet, having converted himself into one. With the help of Sasori, Naruto was able to successfully convert the Nidaime Hokage's corpse into a human puppet, and almost immediately after that, he did the same with the Shodaime Hokage's corpse, though this time it was without the aid of Sasori. Naruto had made sure to dress both Hokage puppets accordingly to give their puppets the dignity they deserved, with the Shodaime dressed in black shinobi pants and short-sleeved top with maroon battle armor covering his upper body and thighs, while Nidaime wore the exact same. Instead, he had blue armor and a white fur neck piece. He had seen pictures of them wearing the exact same thing in battle. He didn't dislike them, as a matter of fact. He greatly respected the 2 men, however. Without the proper preservations, their bodies would have wasted away anyway. This way, he could use their bodies for good, which is something he was sure they would approve of, and if they didn't, well, he didn't much care. It was the least Konoha owed him after all the shit he'd been through. Naruto had a great amount of fun learning to utilize the 2 brother Hokages in battle, and using their own bloodline techniques. It was amazing being able to control Mokuton abilities through a puppet with the Shodaime, and use Suiton Jutsus with the Nidaime puppet without a water source. Naruto remembered reading though that the Nidaime had a lightning chakra blade made for him to supplement his water jutsus that was stolen some time ago by some Nukenin. He resolved to find the blade and give it to his puppet to wield in battle. It was now 3 years since he began learning to use puppets, and it was also Naruto's 12th birthday. Since he began training, he had successfully gained excellent chakra control, increased his stamina immensely, his speed and evasion skills, learned several useful supplementary ninjutsu and creating one of his own, mastering genjutsu techniques to the point where he could almost do them without hand seals, learned about different kinds of poisons, strategy, human anatomy, geology, economics, mathematics, literature, strategy and history, creating his own puppets, mastering the use of chakra strings with said puppets and created 2 human puppets from 2 of the most powerful shinobi in the history of the shinobi world. Sasori had told him that now was the time to start gaining experience against other shinobi, else he wouldn't be able to grow. When Naruto asked if Sasori was sure he was ready for combat against other shinobi, the man just smirked, telling Naruto that he already had the skills of a jounin, and the only thing holding him back would be experience. 2 figures stood in a clearing, one having shoulder-length green hair and wearing an Amigekyo forehead protector, a tight blue and gray sleeveless jumpsuit with a blazing yellow sword of electricity flaring in his right hand and an umbrella-styled weapon on his back. His name was Rokusho Aoi, an A-rank missing nin from Konoha, now a jounin for Amigekyo no Sato after defecting there. The other figure stood motionless, wearing a high-collared dark gray cloak, black lining around the edges, which covered the lower part of his face from view, while a straw hat covered the upper part of the shinobi's face from view, keeping his eyes shadowed, though it was obvious that the shinobi could see clearly even with his face obscured. From beneath the cloak, one could see 2 legs clad in black baggy pants and black shinobi sandals that held up his pants at the shin. Rokusho Aoi, you have something I want, the Raijin, sword of the Nidaime Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato. I suggest handing it over lest you suffer a quick death, the cloaked figure stated emotionlessly, sending a shiver down Aoi's spine, who then glared at the cloaked figure with a sneer on his face, the wind in the area blowing fiercely, causing the trees and other shrubbery to sway in the wind. What makes you think I'll do that? Also, what makes you think you can beat me so easily, HM? By the sound of your voice, you're just a kid, probably trying to make a name of yourself by killing someone as notorious as me. He yelled back over the wind. I'll show you why I'm a jounin, and what the legendary Raijin can do, he proclaimed while charging straight at the cloaked figure who stood motionless. Too scared to move? Your cloak and hat don't hide your fear, boy, Aoi yelled as he closed in for the kill. That was as far as he got forever. It all happened so fast that Aoi didn't know what actually happened. The cloaked figure before him swerved out of the way of the first strike by leaning backwards out of reach from the cackling lightning blade, and then he did the most bizarre thing. The figure latched onto Aoi. This is no time for hugging me, you queer. Aoi didn't get to say much more though, as he felt numerous blades quickly strike his body before being pulled out as the figure let go of Aoi, allowing him to stumble back in shock. Aoi looked down at his torso to see several small specks of blood appear through his jumpsuit. However, what surprised him the most though was when he looked up at his opponent. Instead of the cloaked figure from before, he saw something that looked like a puppet with 6 limbs wearing a tattered cloak that had several punctures in it, and an oddly shaped head. The last thing Aoi ever saw before darkness claimed him was the very same cloaked figure approach the puppet from behind it, and sealing it away in a scroll. Uzumaki Naruto looked at the body of his latest victim, not up to his usual standards admittedly, though he did not kill this missing nin for the money. He had finally got a tip a few weeks ago about their whereabouts of the Raijin, the lightning blade of the Nidaime Hokage, and it apparently was in the hands of his fool who so readily waved it around like it instantly meant his invincibility. It was obvious that it did the opposite though, causing him to think he was much better than he really was. How someone like this could be a jounin, he would never know. Walking over to the corpse, Naruto removed the head and sealed it away in a scroll that he keeps all his bounties in before handing them in. The technique he used to seal the head in the scroll was one he taught himself, wanting to learn the intricate art of Fuinjutsu after reading so much about it. It was probably for the best, seeing as he should know all about the immensely strong seal placed on his stomach as he could. After sealing away the head, he took the brown cylindrical hilt of the Raijin sword before rolling up the cloaked covered sleeve of his left arm, showing 3 main kanji figures surrounded by other sealing kanji tattoos. The 2 main symbols were the kanji of 1 and 2 that were in red, while the kanji around it was random but essential for the sealing of powerful objects on one's body. If nothing, it made for a cool-looking tattoo. Nicking his right thumb with one of his teeth, Naruto used the now bleeding appendage to swipe blood across the symbol for 2 and then applied chakra to it. Immediately, there was a small puff of smoke, and in the clearing was now the lifeless body of the Nidaime Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato, who was turned into a human puppet by the young man in the clearing. Naruto did not want anyone to have access to these puppets other than himself, so he sealed them away on his own body where only his chakra and blood could summon them from the sealing/summoning tattoos he placed them in. Firing a quick Katon jutsu he learned from a scroll he found on a dead Konoha shinobi with one-handed hand seals, he destroyed the rest of Aoi's body before getting Night Aim to grab the Raijin after throwing it at him. Expert puppeteers were known to be able to control puppets with only one chakra string, if enough skill was shown, and though Naruto could certainly do that with his regular battle puppets, he had a little problem with doing it with his human puppets, still requiring 3 strings to use them so they would be at their most effective. Even though that was technically plenty seeing as he could control both his puppets simultaneously with both hands, that did not stop Naruto from trying to be able to use only one strong on each to control them. Who knows when he would need the extra hand in a fight? With the Raijin in hand, Naruto made the Night Aim use his own chakra to activate the sword and do several experimental swings with a smirk as he went through a standard Kenjutsu kata he saw once. It wasn't really essential that he learned Kenjutsu to control the Night Aim's use of the sword's usefulness was in using its lightning properties to send electrical shockwaves through his water jutsu, to make them more deadly. That, and he doubted there was a blade that could block the Raijin for long anyway, except for one of the members of Akatsuki who had a blade that would probably eat the chakra of the Raijin if they were to clash. After he was sure that he had the control of his puppet down, Naruto sealed him back into his arm with the Raijin and used Shunshin to get out of the immediate area, disappearing in the wind. As Naruto arrived at the place he had spent the majority of his time since Sasori-sensei had rescued him from Konoha, he immediately suppressed his chakra signature and hid in the shadows when he heard a voice other than his sensei's talking in a heated argument. "Sasori-kun, I know you are the one that took the bodies of my 2 favorite test subjects, now tell me where they are and I won't have to kill you," threatened a pale-faced ninja with snake-like yellow eyes and long silky black hair. This shinobi was none other than Orochimaru of the Sannin, S-class missing nin of Konoha. With him stood someone who Sasori had told Naruto was a spy for him in Orochimaru's midst, who had silver hair and spectacles, from memory. His name was Kabuto, and he was currently enrolled as a shinobi of Konoha as a spy. "So, you come to my hideout, threaten my life when I have just come from a mission for Akatsuki and am exhausted, and on top of that, you believe me responsible for stealing the corpses of 2 Hokages. If it were not for the fact that you outnumber me and I wasn't exhausted, you'd already be dead. Be gone before my organization realizes what has happened and they forget whatever mercy they have given you and take your head in seconds," threatened Sasori back at his ex-partner. Orochimaru got a cruel smirk on his face, and before Sasori could react, Kabuto attacked, slicing off Hiriko's tail and arms. As Sasori leapt into the trees, ready to abandon Hiriko, and use his ultimate puppeteer technique to kill his enemies, a sword pierced him through the seal on his chest that contained his heart, the only part of his body that was still intact, and the only thing that could be used to kill him. The Orochimaru he had been talking to dissolved in mud as the real one materialized behind him after hiding under some invisibility jutsu. "Was that wise, Orochimaru-sama? Now we cannot find your best test subjects?" inquired Kabuto, despite the glare Orochimaru sent at him. "The fool probably turned them into dolls. They would be no further use to me," he explained. "What about Akatsuki? Surely they will want revenge?" asked Kabuto again as Orochimaru chuckled. "Sasori-kun was much too careless. He assumed I did not know of his little apprentice he had been training," he replied with a cool smirk as Naruto watched on from the shadows trying to suppress his killing intent. He would not attack though, for he too was tired after a long journey home, and it would be foolish to do so against an unknown opponent. "Who was this apprentice?" asked Kabuto, intrigued. Orochimaru smirked again. "The Kyuubi Jinchuriki. It seems that Sasori-kun didn't share the same views as his organization, so even if they seek retribution I can just let that information slip and they will search for Naruto-kun instead of focusing on me. Remember, Kabuto," he said, turning a glare at him, "do not question my motives again. I am not foolish and you are in no position to question me," he warned. "Hi, Orochimaru-sama," responded the faithful servant as they both disappeared using Shunshin no Jutsu, most likely heading back to Odogakure, the newly founded shinobi village in Tea Country. Immediately after Naruto was sure they were gone, he ran out to the clearing and pulled Sasori out of his protective puppet body, revealing a wheezing and dying human puppet who smiled weakly up at him. "Naruto, you were smart to stay hidden," complimented Sasori while Naruto kept quiet, knowing that these would be his sensei's last words. "I'm dying, but I should let you know you have surpassed my every expectation as a student. You will be great," he said, as the light in his eyes started to dim. "Don't be tied down by a hidden village and take my Sendain puppet, use it well." Naruto looked on at his sensei's body, silent tears running down his face as he watched the first person who truly cared for him die in his arms. "Take my journals, they have large amounts of information on Akatsuki's plans, other missing nin, and Orochimaru. Kill Orochimaru, you are stronger than he is, especially with the Kages at your side." Sasori was now speaking to him, though it seemed as if his voice was failing him, which was weird as he had no lungs or vocal cords necessarily to speak of. His sensei's body was eerily complicated. Too much so for him to try and comprehend right now anyway. I may never have said it, but I did care about you like a son. Take care of yourself, Naruto-kun, he finished, the light from his eyes dimming as he died in his arms. Naruto let out a strangled sob he was holding in, and furiously wiped at his eyes, not willing to show weakness, especially in honor of his dead sensei. Naruto now took Sasori's heart out of the special seal. He kept it in the chest cavity of his body, and buried it near the cave he loved so much. Naruto then sealed his body along with Hiriko in a separate scroll after removing his special Akatsuki ring from his finger, not willing to let anyone happen on it, and use the findings to their advantage, never to be seen or used again. He found the scroll in which he had sealed the Sendame Kazakage in and unsealed it, revealing the spiky black-haired Kage with a large gourd filled with poison iron sand and covered in dark robes. Naruto then set out to carve another seal tattoo in his forearm near the ones for his other Kage puppets that was this time green instead of red with 3 horizontal lines on top of each other, signifying the kanji 4-3 surrounded by other sealing kanji before he applied chakra to the tattoo, causing it to shine with a blue light and envelop the Sendame Kazakage puppet and seal it into his arm. Naruto then went into the cave where he found all of Sasori's information scrolls and spent the rest of the night reading through them, learning all the information about every missing nin of B rank and above in the bingo book from all over the shinobi nations, about the different hidden villages and what jutsus they each stored and specialized in, about the spies he had planted and what they had each reported to him most recently about their village's plans, along with his research on puppets. He didn't finish until morning the next day, when he finally went to sleep in his regular bed in the hideout, not to wake for another 5 hours. When he awoke, he stored all of Sasori's gear, puppets, information and scrolls in the same scroll he sealed his body and Hiriko in, and separately sealed that scroll with another sealing tattoo on his right arm, not wanting it to fall in the wrong hands. He preferred sealing important things with tattoos on his person, as he disliked having to carry a ridiculous amount of scrolls on his person constantly, and in all honesty, they did look cool. He sealed it with the kanji 4 love, signifying the main feeling he felt for his sensei and savior for the past 7 years, and began with the project he intended on doing before leaving this place for good and setting out in the world on his own. Naruto removed his cloak, hat, and shirt to reveal his naked torso before molding some chakra at his navel to show the intricate seals holding the Kyuubi at bay. Naruto's main reason for learning Fuinjutsu was so that he could understand his own seal better, and now that he did, he found a way that he could improve on it to improve himself. Through Naruto's training with Sasori, one thing he realized was that the fox had an influence on his body, whether he liked it or not, and it gave him enhanced physical stamina due to the large chakra stores and also enhanced healing abilities. Knowing this, he set out to try and see if he could use the same idea to try and enhance some of his own senses, using the fox as a base for that, namely his sight, hearing and smell, 3 senses that if enhanced would aid a shinobi immensely in battle and out of it. Eventually, he had designed a seal he was going to add to the current one that would unseal those particular senses, therefore adding them to his own. He had to, however, make sure that nothing else would unseal in the process, so the fox could not attempt to release some of its influence on its container. He was sure that he could get in contact with the demon, but he had no desire to do so, not that he was scared, but he wanted to avoid that unpleasant experience. Naruto laid out on his back with the seal exposed, and used chakra strings to dip an ink brush into the pot of ink he had sitting beside him before he quickly and efficiently began to paint additional kanji around in a circular pattern around the seal. He had to be very specific in what he wanted to do, or the unsealing could have any possible consequence. Thus was the magic of Fuinjutsu. The branch of shinobi techniques was nearly limitless, and in that was its main weakness. You had to be deadly specific in your sealing or something could go horribly wrong. Once he was done with painting on the seals, he observed his work and deemed it adequate before snapping 3 of his fingers together and adding chakra to each so that bright blue chakra could be seen on each fingertip. He took a deep breath before slamming it into the seal on his stomach. Had Naruto known there would be pain in the procedure, he might have been able to brace himself. As it was, though, he was expecting no such thing, so when pain erupted in his head so large that he had never felt it before, he immediately blacked out. When Naruto opened his eyes, he realized that he was in absolutely no pain, which was weird seeing as the last thing he remembered before passing out was an immense amount of pain in his head. Looking around, it seemed that he was in an old and moldy sewer with shin-high water everywhere. He heard the sound of water dripping in the distance, while up above there were thick pipes leading down the corridor, the largest of which veering off to the left and into another room. Decided he had nothing better to do, and realizing he didn't feel wet as he walked through the water, he followed the larger pipes into a huge room with a gate that was over several hundred feet tall and roughly 150 feet wide. The large gate seemed to be kept closed with a piece of paper with the word seal on it. As he stepped closer to inspect the paper, he saw 2 humongous eyes open, each with red pupils and a large mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth in the darkness. It didn't take a genius to figure out where he was. Kyuubi, stated Naruto without much emotion, knowing that if he showed fear, the demon would exploit it, though oddly enough, he didn't honestly feel fear. Perhaps it had something to do with knowing how fail-safe the seal was and knowing the great demon could do nothing to him. To his amusement, though, it seemed the demon was annoyed at how he could instill no fear in his jailer. In an incredibly loud and booming voice, the great demon responded, "So it seems my container has tried to alter the seal and winds up in here. Not scared of me, are you, boy?" The demon asked to make sure, its razor-sharp teeth glistening in the light of the room. Naruto rolled his eyes at the attempt to frighten him. "I have altered the seal, unsealing some of your senses without you having influence over them. I imagine it would be beneficial for both of us, so try not to fight it. It will be quite annoying if you were to do so," explained Naruto in a tone that showed no respect or disrespect. "Why shouldn't I, you lousy monkey? You try and steal my demonic traits and I shouldn't interfere? I should kill you where you stand," he replied, changing to a roar at the end, though Naruto stood there completely unfazed. "You mean other than the fact that by unsealing your sight, hearing and smelling abilities that you too will be able to see, hear and smell what I smell? You are the one that should be grateful that I showed you such a mercy. I no doubt could find a way to seal off your access to the senses completely, though I really don't feel the need to as you have no control over them anyway," replied Naruto, eyeing the large kitsune before continuing. "The way I see it, you should be grateful, seeing as in reality you owe me more than you can repay with the pain I have been forced to live through due to your idiocy," hissed Naruto. Both knew exactly that he was referring to him rampaging across Fire Country. "Why should I be thankful?" roared the kitsune. "If it weren't for me, you would be dead from the injuries you sustained," he argued, only to receive a humorless laughter from Naruto in return. "Should I thank the person responsible for saving me from a pit of deadly snakes when said person was the one for throwing me in the pit in the first place? I think not," said Naruto. "With the alteration of the seal, you will see, hear and smell what I do. While communications between us will be limited, the enhancements will no doubt make me more formidable and thus make the container of the great and mighty king of demons," Naruto emphasized with air quotations, "more famous and renowned, not to mention that I could, quite easily, seal you off from those senses, the way I see it. You owe me more than you can repay. Let's start by you telling me why it is that I passed out, though," finished Naruto while looking at the kitsune expectantly, not once wavering his voice as he addressed the very being that would cause lesser men to pee in their pants at the sight of him, let alone a regular 13-year-old boy. After several moments of silence, the QB probably decided his points were valid as he proceeded to talk without the previous animosity he held for his container earlier. "The pain you felt was the result of you gaining my eyes in the ceiling. When you attempted to gain my senses, you failed to realize that my senses may be enhanced by abilities or different properties that would carry over to you with this procedure. My eyes, in this instance, are special in the sense that they make a master of illusions should they possess them. As a kitsune, I was a master of illusions, or what you may call genjutsu, and my eyes allowed me to see through and create illusions by using my eyes or making eye contact with my enemies. You most likely have gained possession of this too, and the pain was your eyes being destroyed only to be replaced by my own," explained the giant fox as Naruto grinned. "They will allow me to perform genjutsu without hand seals and break any genjutsu?" asked Naruto, sounding extremely interested. QB just closed its eyes as if in thought before he opened them and mirrored Naruto's grin. "I am pleased that my container sees the value in using such illusions and is not like all those other lousy meatbags that try and use flashy techniques to compare penis sizes. Yes, your ambition to create illusions without the use of petty hand seals will be possible if you make eye contact with your opponent. However, that only creates illusions targeted for said person you have made eye contact with. It will not work with area of effect illusions. You will also be able to see through any illusion. What kind of kitsune would I be if I were to be fooled by others? These eyes are not technically a digitsu though, as they are simply the abilities of my eyes. Like how normal human eyes are designed to see by sending messages to the brain, mine were designed to be used as thus as well as see. You will not be able to activate or deactivate them at will, seeing as you literally have my eyes now. They will look exactly like the ones you see here," he explained, as Naruto looked into its red pupils with black slits, thinking how intimidating it would look when his opponents looked into his eyes. "When you wake up, you will no doubt be assaulted by the smells, sights and sounds surrounding you, and I suggest blocking off 2 of the 3 senses immediately so you can get used to them, then unblock 1 of the other 2 until you get used to it, and so on. Now, if there is nothing else?" the QB asked, sounding irritated at having to impart his wonderful knowledge on a lowly human. "Nothing," replied Naruto. "Then you can leave with my thanks and best wishes. Become strong with these gifts and leave me in peace. I may not be able to break out of the seal, but I sure as hell am not going to die because my opponent was weak. Leave," he finished as he forcefully expelled Naruto from his mind and back to the land of the living. As Naruto opened his eyes, he was glad that he had attempted this in a cave, as it was now morning and the sun was shining through the tree canopies outside onto the forest floor. However, the dripping water he could hear like a gong every 2 seconds and the itching of his nose were enough to want to outright murder someone. Finding some tissues, he stuffed some into his ears and nose, hoping that he wouldn't get ambushed anytime soon, as he needed to train his senses so he was not overwhelmed by their new power and how sensitive they now were. Covering his eyes with his hand as to add some shade, Naruto stepped outside the cave, the glaring sun being covered by his hand, and looked around in every direction in the forest. Looking out into the forest then back into the cave, he noticed that he could see in both equally well, which was spectacularly well. It seemed that his sight was increased to that of a hawk, or fox would be more appropriate, as he was able to make out incredibly fine details such as nicks and cuts on trees over 100 feet away. He was also able to see into the cave from outside as if it were lit within, which it was not, as there was no fire on inside and the lamps were out. He came to the conclusion that these eyes must pick up light signals better than his old ones and send them back to his brain, allowing for vision in the night and better all-around vision. Walking over to the nearby stream, he bent down and looked at the reflection of his face in the clear water to see two slitted black pupils surrounded by blood-red irises in the middle of his white eyes. It truly did make for an intimidating and cool sight. After spending several minutes fooling around and posing with different glare to see how they would look, Naruto chuckled quietly to himself and spent the rest of the day standing in the middle of the clearing with two of his main senses blocked off as he tried to spot different minor details in the area. He then ran around at high speeds to see if his sight could pick things up while moving at said speeds, and to his delight, it could do so wonderfully. Finally, he looked up into the sky without looking directly at the sun to find that he had gotten used to his eyes to the point where they were at least better than his old ones. After making himself some dinner by catching some fish and eating them in over a fire, he spotted a small squirrel on the other side of the clearing and decided to see if he could use his new eye's power on it. Focusing chakra through his eyes, and focusing on what illusion he wanted to place the unsuspecting squirrel under, he performed the genjutsu. As he did so, he felt the chakra mold itself behind his eyes before being expelled through them into his opponent, the squirrel. What happened next put a big grin on his face that would not get whipped off for quite some time. The squirrel scurried over to a rock that he had tricked it into believing it was a piece of meat and attempted to eat it, only to gnaw at it with confusion as the juicy piece of meat would not be punctured. Naruto awoke the next morning, keen to work on his hearing next, as he took out the pieces of tissue he used to block out most of the sound coming to his ears. With enhanced hearing, it was like a double-edged sword. He may be able to hear extremely well, but that could be used against him should someone attack him with sound techniques like shinobi from Otogeki would, or if they simply used loud sounds to distract him. So, he would have to learn to regulate sounds coming into his ears so that he would not blow his eardrums when trying to hear out his opponents from a distance. He sat next to a roaring waterfall which at first almost deafened him, but he got used to it as he tried to pick up other sounds in the surrounding area despite the booming sound coming from behind him. This exercise took him several days in comparison to his eyes, which he had slowly gotten used to more as the days went by, but after 4 days of practicing his hearing, he was finally ready to train his smelling so it was up to par. His newfound sense of smell was much easier to get accustomed to, as all he needed to do was plant several different odors around his campsite at different distances away, such as poisons, food, animals and flowers, and try to pinpoint each one with just the use of his nose. At first it was hard to distinguish between all of the different smells his senses were assaulted with, as he could also smell the dew on the trees and grass, the smell of something burning, animal droppings, mold on the cave walls and such. So he changed his tactic by walking around the forest and taking in the smell of as many individual substances he could, including the things he placed around the forest as well as different animals, trees, even going so far as to go into the closest town, and taking in the smell of different people, alcohol, building materials, foods and cloth. This was by far the longest sense to train, as really, it probably would never stop being trained as he could always find something new that would give off a new scent. So, all he tried to do for now was to control his sense of smell so he was not bombarded a horrid stench every time someone decides to pass gas in his presence. It had now been roughly a month since he altered the seal and began to train his senses to a point where he was satisfied. His hearing was back to normal, but he got such control over it that should he want to hear things at a distance such as a whispered conversations over 100 feet away, all he would need to do is apply chakra to his ears and he could focus on where the sound was coming from to hear it. His smell was coming along nicely, now no longer feeling the need to empty his stomach whenever passing a used toilet, or when someone passes gas in his immediate vicinity, which he was immensely grateful for. The most fun he had though was with his sight as he placed minor genjutsu on unsuspecting villagers and even some lowly bandits, for fun, and while making money, which to his delight, worked extremely well. Now though he faced the problem of still needing experience if he was to ever stand a chance against his enemies, and needing a steady source of income. The 13-year-old decided that he would leave the place he had come to call his home for good, as it only brought him bad feelings now with the death of his sensei, and travel the shinobi world, obtaining technique scrolls, getting bounties and gaining valuable fighting experience. He may be strong, but if there was one thing Sasori sensei taught him, it was that there was always room for improvement, and he intended to do just that. Donning his dark gray cloak and straw hat, Uzumaki Naruto set off into the world and began his travels. Team 7 under Jounin Hatake Kakashi currently sat in their client's house after their sensei fainted from chakra exhaustion caused by his fight with a missing Nin Momochi Zabuza. Their mission was to escort the old bridge builder to his home in the Land of Waves and protect him from rogue thugs and bandits who worked for someone who didn't want the bridge connecting the island nation to the mainland, thus increasing the nation's economy and bringing them from the brink of poverty. Things rarely go as planned though, as the three newly appointed genin, Uchiha Sasuke, Haruno Sakura and Hyuga Hanabi under Jounin Sensei Hatake Kakashi encountered two Chunin-level missing Nin on this supposed C-ranked mission, followed by Zabuza himself, and a ranked missing Nin, whose interference placed the mission as a high B-rank mission to a lower rank one at least. Far too dangerous for the likes of genin-level shinobi fresh out of the academy. If you were to ask the genin their opinion of the matter though, they would tell you different. Uchiha Sasuke, the sole survivor of the Uchiha massacre after his brother single-handedly wiped out the entire clan, saved him in one night with the use of the legendary Manjiki Sharingan before mentally attacking the then 8-year-old Sasuke and fleeing from the village, all in the process of testing his capacity. Ever since that incident, the brooding Uchiha changed from his vibrant if somewhat cocky youthful attitude to one of dark, brooding and arrogant nature with a legion of fangirls after his cold heart. The Uchiha were famous for their roles as the enforcers of Konoha, running the police force on their own until the clan was wiped out. They did this with the aid of their bloodline limit, the Sharingan, which, as the name suggests, allows the user to commit many things to memory, including ninjutsu, genjutsu and taijutsu movement at a singular glance. Due to this bloodline limit being a digitsu like the Hyuga's Byakugan, there has been an age-old conflict between the two families over who is the strongest in Konoha. Haruno Sakura was one of these said fangirls, with pink hair and abnormally large forehead, and a slim and unfit-looking figure. She, like most girls her age after the Uchiha, do not take being shinobi seriously and follow the brooding boy around like lost puppies. The girl had no real shinobi skills to speak of, but to be fair, she did have incredibly good book smarts and an impressive control over her minuscule chakra supply. Her once best friend and currently main rival in achieving Sasuke's affection, Yamanaka Ino, a fellow classmate and member of Team 10, was the only thing giving her drive at all to get better aside from impressing her wonderful Sasuke-kun. Sakura comes from a non-shinobi background, with both her parents being civilians and her being the first shinobi in the family. Her family pushed her to try and win the Uchiha's affection to elevate the Haruno's standing within Konoha, something that Sakura was all too happy to oblige with. The last and youngest member of the team at the age of 10, making her 4 years younger than her teammates, was Hyuga Hanabi, sister to the heiress of the prestigious Hyuga clan and daughter of Hyuga Hayashi, the head of the clan. Arrogant, cold and serious to a fault, she was a very good shinobi, especially for her age. She was seen as a prodigy in the gentle first taijutsu style of the Hyuga, which uses their bloodline limit, the Byakugan, to see their opponent's chakra system while they use precise bursts of chakra from their hand and fingers to close the pathways, stopping the flow of chakra and immobilizing of killing their opponents with a single blow. The black-haired girl had an extreme hate for her sister, who holds the title of clan heiress over her head like it was some superficial toy to show off, even if she was nowhere near as proficient or skilled of a shinobi as Hanabi. This resentment of her sister, along with the treatment she receives as a result of it, has grown to become a bitterness that she holds towards her family for allowing such a weakling to claim the title. Now, though, they all sat in the dining room of their client, Tazuna's house, waiting for their sensei to wake up after his fight with the missing Nin to see what is on the schedule for the day. Suddenly, 3 heads whipped in the direction of the stairs to see a tall silver-haired man whose hair seemed to defy gravity, that wore a face mask covering his lower face and a Konoha forehead protector with the insignia of the Leaf Village on it worn diagonally covering his left eye. He was leaning on a single crutch as he hobbled down the stairs, obviously still suffering from fatigue after his rite. "Yo," he said happily, his one visibly eye curving, which was the only sign that the man was smiling, as well as the small creases in his mask where his cheeks rose from smiling. "Kakashi-sensei, are you feeling better?" asked Sakura, fussing over her sensei, who seemed perfectly fine were it not for the fatigue. Hi, I actually came down here to discuss a couple of things with you three," confessed Kakashi, shrugging off Sakura's concern. Seeing that he had all 3 of their attention, Sasuke's while eating rice and Hanabi, even though she was leaning against the wall and looking out the window, he could tell she was listening. "Zabuza may not be dead," he said simply, causing an instant reaction from the 3 genin, who all whipped their heads in his direction, and Sasuke choking on his rice, making for a comical sight. He had to suppress a chuckle as Hanabi smirked at the sight. She seemed to take extreme pleasure in watching the Uchiha heir make a fool of himself. "What do you mean not dead, sensei?" came the question from Sakura, the pink-haired banshee whose screams were some sort of sound-based ninjutsu. He was certain of it. "Well, I mean that he's still alive," he deadpanned as Sakura face vaulted and Hanabi smirked again. Sasuke was still coughing and pounding his chest where his food pipe was in the hopes it would aid in making it go down. After some more choking and realizing it wouldn't work, he thought quick and made some hand seals before initiating the Gokaku no Jutsu, incinerating the offensive rice. He then glared at everyone in the room after he was sure he wasn't going to die for not helping, though no one seemed to notice. Hanabi was the one who decided to get some more information. What makes you believe that Momochi-san is still alive, Kakashi-sensei? She asked stoically with only the slightest sign of amusement showing in her eyes at both her teammates' actions. Well, firstly, the hunter Nin didn't dispose of the body on the spot and took it away, likely to escape. Secondly, their weapon of choice was a saban to the neck to kill, which is usually not the best way to kill somebody, though it is quite an effective way to put someone in a death-like state. Zabuza's heartbeat must have been so slow that I missed the pulse when I checked, he explained to the 3 students, hoping to teach them a lesson, and to the avidly listening Tazuna with his daughter Tsunami. So what are you gonna do? Asked a nervous Tazuna, not sure how much he should trust ninja whose allegiance was to their village, and not some old bridge builder. Kakashi shrugged and motioned to his cane. Not much I can do, but that's okay. Zabuza shouldn't be in fighting condition for another 2 weeks, 1 at least. I did severely injure him before he escaped. In that time I intend to set up guard rotations for you at the bridge and train my team some, he explained, motioning towards his students, 2 of which looked excited and eager while the pink-haired one looked at the Uchiha for his reaction before deciding to be excited. This action was not lost on either Hanabi, Sasuke, or Kakashi either. Uzumaki Naruto stood at the edge of the forest up in a tree observing the state of the land of Wave. At first glance, one would easily say that this country would be a beggar's nest that couldn't possibly prosper, but Naruto knew better. His old sensei who passed on around a year ago now had brought him here a few times to get supplies and train his genjutsu, and get mercenary work, and when he had come then, the place had been booming economically with most of the shipping infrastructure under its control. According to some intelligence he had happened upon though, the land was having its proverbial balls held in a vice by the evil businessman Gato of Gato Inc., who had milked the country dry of all economical resources by controlling the docks and any transport off the island nation, so he literally controlled Wave's economy. His plan was simple: find Gato, kill him, take his assets for his own, give half back to the country, make sure the bridge they're trying to build gets completed, and in the end, he will get a country to offer his services to for hire. He needed to make money after all. It wasn't that he was poor, far from it, especially after he relinquishes Gato of his assets and finds a new source of employment, but he had plans to achieve, and those plans needed money. Taking one last look at the humongous bridge in the distance leading to the mainland that was almost complete, he lowered his straw hat and headed towards the village. He had some information gathering to accomplish. Once he was on the outskirts of the local village closest to the uncompleted bridge, he made several dozen Kagebunshin and had them henge into different-looking civilians before sending them into the city with some cash each. It should be fairly easy for a paying customer to obtain information in a poor village, especially if said customer had no regard to the consequences of his questioning. Not that he was scared of Gato or his men, but he couldn't have Gato know that a powerful shinobi was onto him and after his head. The man would just relocate his business and make finding him again all the more troublesome. As he waited in the forest, he plucked a leaf from the nearby tree and held it in his palm with his other hand resting on top of his other palm, enclosing the leaf in between his hands. This was an exercise he picked up from a scroll he had stolen from Sunagekyo one time that helped in training his chakra's natural affinity, which was wind. In his studies, he read that most shinobis' chakra leans towards a certain nature, and there was a way to test this. The way in which he used was the paper test, which required a special piece of card that he had to channel chakra into to discover what his chakra affinity was. The reaction he got was that the card split in 2 down the middle, which indicated his chakra's natural affinity was wind. Had the card burnt, his affinity would be fire; had it crumbled, it would be lightning; had it turned to dust, he would be earth; and if it had gotten wet, he would be water. If one discovers their chakra's affinity early, they can train it and learn to manipulate it. Not to mention that learning to manipulate the type of chakra one's own chakra has an affinity towards is infinitely easier than learning to manipulate chakra of any other type. The current exercise he was doing, splitting a leaf down the middle with only the use of wind chakra, was the first step in learning to manipulate wind-based chakra, and once he mastered that nature manipulation, it would be infinitely easier to do wind-based jutsus or add wind-based chakra to other jutsus and or weapons. Naruto pulled his hands apart to see the leaf had indeed split perfectly down the middle. With a small smirk, he threw the 2 pieces of the leaf away and leaned his head against the tree while constantly keeping aware of his surroundings. Originally, when he had pilfered a scroll from Suna which detailed how to train in wind manipulation, he had read it many times and it took him a good month to get it down. He knew he could have used the skill of Kagebunshin to have all his clones do it with him so he would learn quicker, but he felt that when he learned things on his own, he could use them better than if he had taken a shortcut to learning. It had taken him a good portion of this last year to get it down, but he was finally able to manipulate his chakra into wind-based chakra at will to add it to his jutsus if required, or his weapons, or simply use the wind-based chakra on its own. It was definitely worth the time he spent learning. He had read from Sasori's journals on the subject that 2 of the 3 Sannin, Orochimaru and Jiraiya, had mastered manipulating their chakra into all 5 forms, which was a respectable feat on its own. They weren't Sannin for nothing. At that moment, he felt some foreign knowledge come into his mind, signifying that one of his clones had learned something and dispelled himself to pass on the information to Naruto. It seemed that Gato, along with his regular band of petty samurai and mercenaries, has hired 2 missing nin, one of which was Momochi Zabuza, a ranked nuke nin from Kirigakure no Sato and also formerly member of the 7 Swordsmen of the Mist. He was once a subordinate of Hashigeki Kisame, one of the members of Akatsuki, also an ex-member from the 7 Swordsmen of the Mist. However, he attempted a coup d'etat against the old Mizukage, which failed, causing him to flee from the country and become a missing nin. He must be desperate if he is sinking low enough to take work from an evil businessman to get money. It seemed that Zabuza also had an accomplice who he bragged about being stronger than even he. Not that Zabuza was incredibly skilled, but he was a jounin and was dangerous. His clone couldn't get any more information on this mysterious accomplice though, so it dispelled itself before he was discovered. He then shuddered when he realized what his clone had to do to get that information. It had used henge to disguise itself as a female prostitute, and coerced the information from one of the higher-ranking mercenaries that were patrolling the docks. Thank God it used a genjutsu to get the information instead of servicing him, or else he would probably be scarred by the action for life. Just then, another clone dispersed itself, revealing more information. Apparently, the old bridge builder hired a team of genin with their jounin sensei to guard him while he finished construction on the bridge. They also apparently had a run-in with Zabuza before arriving here and were unable to kill him. The only information the clone got about the group was that their sensei was the infamous copy ninja Hatake Kakashi from Konoha. Konoha. How he hated that village. He still remembered how he was treated when he was but a child, and he also remembered how it was that Sasori had found him in Konoha. He got them back though by stealing several high-ranking jutsu scrolls from the Hokage's mansion, useful ones too, filled with katan jutsus, kinjutsus and medical ninjutsu. Not that he had a use for the latter personally, but who knows when he could find some use for it. He had no interest in learning any advanced medical ninjutsu save for the basic Shosen no Jutsu to speed up cell regeneration on another's body. Kyuubi was more than enough to heal his own wounds, and much better than any jutsu too. Just then, he got a message from one of his shadow clones saying that he had spotted the team from Konoha training their chakra control in the forest near the bridge. Smirking at the information, he sent a message back to that specific clone to keep a constant eye on them, and not to be seen. God, he loved the Kage Bunshin technique, infinitely useful. The Kage Bunshin Naruto stood in the trees hidden by the leaves and branches between him and the group of 3 people practicing in the clearing. These children all looked to be training chakra control by doing the tree climbing exercise. Naruto just rolled his eyes. These children look to be his age and are only now doing the tree climbing exercise. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Konoha, said to be the strongest of the 5 shinobi nations, having genin that do not have enough chakra or control to complete this exercise. Looking in the clearing again, it seemed that the smallest of the 3, a Hyuga, was the best at the exercise, being able to scale the tree without falling. However, her reserves wouldn't allow for her to do it more than a few times, as she already looked tired. The pink-haired one who was so unbelievingly loud and constantly annoying the only boy of the 3 had also scaled the tree, but her reserves were so bad, she couldn't even make her way back down the tree she scaled. The boy was able to scale 20 feet up the tree before flipping off and landing on the ground to try again. It seemed he had decent reserves but average control over them. His observations almost made him want to snort in amusement, and he would have if he didn't want to remain hidden. Sasori-sensei had him doing these exercises when he was 7 years old, and he completed them in one day only to continue doing them to increase his reserves and control further. Would he have wound up this pathetic if he had stayed in Konoha? He was now immensely grateful, well, more than he already was, to his late sensei for taking him away from that sorry excuse for a village, though he reasoned that most villages would have the same standard if Konoha was viewed as the strongest. Just then, a silver-haired ninja wearing the standard Konoha jounin uniform with one eye being covered by his forehead protector limped into the clearing using the crutch to balance himself, or to lean on, classic symptoms of exhaustion. Naruto recognized the man from the pictures of him in the bingo book, Hatake Kakashi. The man walked into the clearing and gave a few pieces of advice to the genin before his head snapped in his direction. He was a Kage Bunshin after all. He couldn't honestly expect to be able to repress his chakra enough to remain hidden and stay in existence. Immediately, he felt a kunai to his throat and a presence of someone behind him, while Kakashi disappeared from the shocked genin's view. The Hyuga then activated her bloodline limit and looked in their direction and widened her eyes. It seemed that she had finally spotted him. Who are you and why are you spying on my team? Asked Kakashi in what was supposed to be a threatening voice. Naruto didn't feel threatened though, the man was in no condition to fight, and he was only a clone after all. Naruto merely stood up slowly, with his back still to Kakashi. Turning his head ever so slightly, Naruto spied this new threat from the shade of his straw hat, still keeping his eyes from view. Kakashi seemed to be eyeing him warily, if only he knew. Hatake Kakashi, answered Naruto, surprising Kakashi at his young-sounding voice. My reasons are my own. Immediately, his surprise disappeared though, and Kakashi narrowed his eyes, ready to slit his throat. Naruto merely smirked under the cover of his cloak though and muttered two words that made Kakashi gasp and leap away before it was too late. Bunshin Daibakaha. The chakra within the clone rushed out in one massive display of power, expelling the chakra within the clone with such force it created a massive explosion that all but destroyed the tree they were standing on and blasting Kakashi into another tree. As soon as Kakashi landed, using his crutch for support, his three genin were by his side with worried, anxious, and even excited looks. What the hell was that? Screeched the pink-haired banshee, causing the other three to wince. How the loud girl passed the ninja exam was beyond them. That was someone who has been spying on you for an unknown amount of time before I arrived. I only barely sensed his chakra signature when I arrived, so it's no surprise that you all missed it. What shocked me though is that it was a Kage Bunshin, not a real person. Also, the technique used to explode the Kage Bunshin also surprised me. Both techniques are Kenjutsu native to Konoha, and I am positive that he was no Konoha shinobi. I also don't know of any Konoha missing nin that would fit his description and could use those two jutsu he trailed off, not knowing how the next bit of information would affect his team. The only other Konoha missing nin who could use both those techniques and is young is Uchiha Itachi, but he would be older than that shinobi sounded. At the mention of Uchiha, both Hanabi and Sakura turned to Sasuke, who seemed to be glaring at the ground while clenching his fists in rage. Without another word, the brooding Uchiha went back to his tree to continue his training while the other two girls followed. After the commotion, none of the four noticed the barely audible pops signifying the disappearing of another Kage Bunshin a few hundred yards away. Elsewhere in the same forest, Uzumaki Naruto's eyes glazed as he assimilated the information from his last two clones. HN was his non-committal reply as he went back to meditating as his clones gathered information. Several days later found Naruto leaning against a tree trunk, his straw hat pulled over his eyes and his cloak unbuttoned down to his mid-torso, revealing his chest and lower half of his face. The importance of the lower half of his face being visible was that if one were to look closely, they would see a stick of what seemed to be Pocky sticking out of the corner of his mouth as he sucked on it, and read a scroll he had unrolled. Naruto had found out a lot of information in the past few days about Gato and his organization. In his attempts to find his hideout and destroy his organization, his clones had discovered some vital information. Every night at midnight, an appointed leader of shipping trade would visit the docks to supervise some of the shipment imports and exports before having a word with many of the employees and leaving to an undisclosed location. The reason why the location was undisclosed was that he entered a building on the edge of town that led to a large underground tunnel leading to a totally different island he assumed, which was where Gato based his empire. The only thing stopping him from sneaking in and assassinating the evil businessman was lack of information. The one thing Sasori had hammered into his head over and over was that even if you are confident in your abilities, rushing into a situation uninformed was a quick way to ensure your death, for even a civilian could kill a seasoned ninja with some poison and clever tactics. It also seemed that the village was on the brink of starvation as prices for meager meals shot up to astronomical amounts and actual food imports for anyone aside people who worked for Gato were few and far between. This increased the theft rate amongst the villagers by a large amount and thus, the violence in their desperation. He was just thanking Kami that he had learned to hunt and fish, else he would be suffering from these effects too, not to mention he had an almost infinite supply of different flavors of Pocky sealed away in a special scroll under his cloak. Naruto gave a wistful sigh as he remembered the day he had gotten hooked on the lovely sweet. He was complaining to Sasori about the lack of ramen when he was first taken on as an apprentice, which drove his sensei mad. In a last-ditched effort to stop his whining, he had purchased a box of Pocky from the closest village, claiming that there was no ramen there and that it was popular with the kids. As soon as he tried the sweet, he was hooked with the wonderful chocolate flavors mixing with the breadstick it was coated on, not to mention the fact that there were literally dozens of different flavors, one for every day of the month. He was interrupted from his thoughts when he heard the crunching of grass a few hundred feet away from his position and the scent of, strangely enough, water, lilacs and blood coming his way. Silently, Naruto leapt into the tree and hid behind one of the branches as the person kept heading in his direction, making sure to cover up where he had been sitting not too long ago, as it was obvious someone had been if the dent in the grass was any indication. Being a missing nin made one paranoid to a fault. As soon as Naruto caught a glimpse of the person who arrived wearing a pink kimono and having long brown hair, he had to stifle a gasp of amazement. The person was beautiful beyond compare, the most beautiful creature he had ever seen, and taking a whiff of their scent, he almost face vaulted when he realized one key factor: this beautiful person was a damn boy. The thought almost made him chuckle. Either the boy was a transvestite, or he liked confusing people with his looks and state of dress. Either way, it was amusing. Naruto watched silently as the boy began to pick some herbs from the small field of flowers nearby and frowned. The particular herbs he was selecting were needed in a wide array of different healing ointments and potions, such as chakra restorative potions, wound potions, and muscle relaxants. That and the smell of blood made Naruto suspicious. When he observed the boy more closely, he also noticed that he carried himself very carefully, with every movement being precise and efficient, never exerting too much to make every move, doing the bare minimum, like an experienced shinobi. Then he remembered the reports his clones had given him on various conversations the Konoha shinobi had and what villagers had reported. Gato had 2 shinobi in his employ. One was Momochi Zabuza and the other was a mysterious hunter nin with long brown hair that always wore a mask, as hunter nins do. The description definitely fit the boy, who also had long brown hair, was picking herbs for healing ointments most likely to heal Zabuza after his defeat, carried himself like an experienced shinobi, and was disguised like a civilian girl. No one would suspect her, and he almost didn't either. Naruto then realized that for these shinobi to do their job, they would have to have a hiding place away from Hunter Nin for a prolonged period of time so they wouldn't have to fight 2 battles at once. This led him to believe that they were most likely staying in Gato's base of operations. Given that, Naruto made sure to memorize his scent so that he could track it later to the base. He may be able to keep hidden now, but that was because he was not moving at all, and thus was able to suppress his chakra to a point that one would need to be extremely talented in the field to detect him. After he finished picking his herbs, the boy left without even looking back. After several minutes in which Naruto was unable to hear him anymore, he jumped out of the tree and made sure to check which herbs the boy picked before referring to his scrolls to find out what healing ointments he planned on making for his partner. Neither he nor Sasori were particularly fond of healing, but they were of poisons, and one needed to know how to cure poisons if they chose to make them. Also, when using herbs to make poisons, you should learn what else they could be used for. Before setting to work, Naruto made sure to firmly implant in his mind that boy's scent so he could track him tomorrow morning back to the entrance of the base, and waiting for them to come to him instead of him rushing in. The next morning, Naruto was quick to remember that boy's scent and followed it through the forest. He passed many slash trees, minor camping sites, and blood stains which gave him a bad feeling, but he continued on his way where the scent led him until he noticed that led off in another direction once he reached a cave opening. Naruto frowned when he realized this. He doubted that the shinobi could tell he was there yesterday, so he surmised that he must be off with Zabuza somewhere. It then clicked in his mind, the reason for the healing bombs yesterday, the late time in which he was picking the herbs. They intended to attack the bridge builder today, and that was where they must have been. Dismissing this for now and sneaking into the cave using a jutsu that made him invisible and hid his scent, Mai Seigekyu no Jutsu, Naruto made quick work of any mercenary he came across by slitting their throats using his wind chakra to make a wind blade. That way they wouldn't make a noise when he killed them. Naruto continued further and further into the cave past numerous doors, turning off lights as he continued on his path of destruction so he would be the only one that could see in the dark. Naruto had a bad feeling though when he could smell something like sweat and semen deeper in the tunnels, coming from a criminal base. That is never a good sign. Further investigation had him hearing grunts and moans as well as the sound of a crying woman. Putting 2 and 2 together, Naruto barely was able to rein in his killing intent at that moment before a vicious idea came to him as he snuck into the room in which the taping was occurring, only to pause in his stride when he noticed 3 men having their way with someone who resembled the bridge builder's daughter. She looked to have been beaten before they began to have their way with her, while one was forcing his member down her mouth, and the other 2 were penetrating her both rectally and normally. Looking to the other side of the room, he spotted a dozen more naked men pleasuring themselves, most likely getting ready to have their turn after these 3 were done. The 3 men with the woman were jeering and groping her inappropriately, while the other men in the room took a pleasure in seeing these 3 men violate a defenseless woman so badly. Also, by the sheen of sweat and the amount of liquids beneath the orgy, this had been going on for quite some time. Deciding to give these men the worst pain possible, he decided to use a genjutsu he had created for men such as this filth. He began, immediately getting the attention of everyone in the room as he dropped his stealth jutsu, allowing everyone to see a shinobi with the upper part of his face being covered in a shadow created by a straw hat, and his body covered by a long dark gray cloak with a high open collar, allowing them to see the lower part of his face, which revealed a chiseled jaw line that was set in a neutral and emotionless line. Realizing that he had every bandit looking at him, including the woman who seemed to be relieved, Or as relieved as someone could look while still being penetrated in 3 orifices, he used the chakra string to discreetly move her head away so that she wouldn't be caught in his genjutsu by looking into his eyes. Naruto then lifted the rim of his hat, allowing the shadow that was covering his eyes to be lifted so that every bandit in the room had a clear view of his crimson-slitted eyes that were glowing eerily in the dark as Naruto pushed chakra through them. The second you decided to defile this poor woman in such a way, you signed your death warrants, he finished in an emotionless voice, sending a shiver down all of the men's spines at hearing it. Being as stupid as they were though and completely unversed in the shinobi ways, they looked directly into his eyes, as if hypnotized to do so. That was their first and last mistake. Through his eyes, Naruto cast his genjutsu that connected with anyone who was making eye contact with him. Immediately, to the bandits, it seemed that the cloaked figure vanished into the shadows before a 50-story reddish-orange furred kitsune took its place with 9 humongous swishing tails behind it. The room they were currently in, as well as their other comrades and source of pleasure, having disappeared from their sight, leaving each man with only themselves and the frightening sight of a humongous, smirking, and delighted Kyubi no Kitsune. Tsunami, the daughter of the bridge builder who was resigned to her fate not long ago with being beaten, raped before most likely used in some other way by the evil Gato, was treated to the sight of every man in the room dropping to the floor and screaming so loud and with so much pain that some of them destroyed their voice boxes and couldn't scream anymore. Some were trying to claw at their own faces while others had their bodies spasm as whatever her savior did was running its source. The mysterious force that was forcing her to look away from her savior's eyes vanished, allowing her to look upon her savior that had his straw hat hanging loosely in his left hand, revealing his face that was set in stone, watching the men scream their throats hoarse from whatever he had done to them. His crimson eyes that would most likely send some screaming at the sight of them were oddly comforting and suiting to his features when not focused on her. Also, his long blonde hair seemed to be tied in a short ponytail while his bangs were being kept away from his face by a forehead protector similar to the ones her father had hired to protect him, except it had a slash going through it. If she was honest with herself, the boy who couldn't be older than 15 was indeed handsome in an animalistic sort of way. Once Naruto was sure they had suffered the most possible amount from his demonic genjutsu, he pulled them all together in the middle of the room using chakra strings, also removing the 3 from the scared and beaten-up woman and tied them together in the middle of the room. He then took out a single kunai from within his cloak that seemed to drop into his hand from somewhere within and slashed each of the men once with said kunai. Naruto, seeing Tsunami's confusion at his actions, decided to elaborate for the distraught woman, thinking that knowing her tormentors will be suffering even more would ease her some. I have injected them all with an acidic type of venom with my kunai that will travel all through their veins and burn through them, causing massive internal hemorrhaging, should that not kill them. The acidic venom will spread to other organs within their body and make them melt similar to their veins. Simply it will be a most excruciating death for all of them. Are you okay? Startled by the viciousness of the death this boy was handing out to her tormentors, not that she minded any, and how easily he could change the topic and talk about it, all she could do was slowly shake her head before breaking down into tears again as the memory of what happened earlier washed over her again. Naruto sighed and approached her slowly, making sure not to touch her, as he didn't know if that would make matters worse. What's your name? He asked gently. Tsunami stopped sobbing for a moment, still naked as the day she was born, with numerous bruises, cuts, lashes and open wounds spread all over her body. Tsunami, she answered quietly. Tsunami-san, he replied gently, I am going to do my best to heal your wounds for now. It will require me to heal you in some places that may make you feel uncomfortable. Is that okay? Only using a few seconds to ponder, she nodded her head in the positive slowly as Naruto lay her down on her back and placed a hand a few inches above her skin. The only medical jutsu he knew was the Shosen no Jutsu. Activating the jutsu over her body, she watched with awe as a green light shone from his hands and went into her body. As the technique he was using was traveling all over her body, traversing over cuts, bruises and broken bones, she marveled at how they seemed to heal before her eyes. Some of the more serious breaks, she noticed, didn't heal, but all the bruises and cuts closed or disappeared, while small breaks to her fingers and wrists were healed. When the ninja began to heal the bruising in her nether regions, she did feel slightly uncomfortable as she started to get a warm and tingly sensation down there. Not that it wasn't a pleasant feeling, but it was unwelcome nonetheless. She allowed it to happen though, as she felt the bruises disappearing down there also. After Naruto was done with healing her, he removed his coat to reveal his tight and toned body that was covered with a brown muscle shirt with a long-sleeved black mesh ninja shirt underneath that had the left sleeve shortened, allowing for an elaborate tattoo with the kanji for 1, 2 and 3 to show. His loose black ninja pants were covered in blood where the cloak was not protecting them from it, most likely as he made his way into this room, as she noticed the cloak she was wrapped around in was covered in blood. The only other distinguishing feature she noticed of the boy was that he had a silver hoop earring in each ear and 3 whisker marks on each cheek just above his defined jawline. She marveled at how young this boy must be, No older than the shinobi that came to assist her father, no doubt. Tsunami-san, I suggest you remain close behind me, for my purpose for coming to this location has not yet been fulfilled, he explained, in a voice that still showed gentleness, and that he didn't mean harm, yet it didn't hold much emotion either. Tsunami only nodded as she got up and followed Naruto out the door, wincing in pain as she felt her broken ribs causing her pain whenever she tried to breathe, and also at the sound of more desperate screams coming from her tormentors as the poison spread. Naruto continued to delve deeper and deeper into the hideout, passing numerous groups of guards that he disposed of easily enough by using a genjutsu to put them to sleep as he passed them. He didn't kill them mainly because he didn't want to waste any effort in doing so, and besides, every 30 feet, he stuck a powerful explosive seal on the wall closest to him, to be activated once he left the base. Each seal was connected with a fine chakra string, and when he followed the seals back out, he would only have to send a pulse down the singe-long string that would cause a domino effect with each explosive note it was connected to. That would also, coincidentally, deal with the bandits he left to sleep. Eventually, Tsunami and Naruto found an office that had a large safe hidden behind a portrait of who he recognized as Gato himself. Opening the safe by blowing off the locking mechanism, he looked inside to find the largest amount of money he had ever seen. The man really did bleed this country dry, a country that was economically booming before he arrived. There had to be at least 100 billion yen in here, 75 of which he intended to return back to the country along with the deeds to the docks Gato illegally owned, while he kept that last 25 billion yen for himself. Tsunami's eyes widened in shock at the money she saw in the vault, and wondered what her savior was going to do with the money that obviously came from her people's hard labor. Naruto, sensing her confusion, answered for her. Tsunami-san, 75% of this money will be returned to the feudal lord of Wave Country based on some stipulations along with the deeds. Do not worry, of course, I will take the last 20% as payment. I did do all of the work after all. Tsunami was going to cry again, but this time because of happiness. Sure, he was taking an almost ridiculous amount for himself, but the amount he would be giving back coupled with the bridge her father was building would make Wave a wonderful place to live again. Unable to contain her emotions of gratitude and happiness anymore, she rushed Naruto, ignoring the pain in her bones, and grabbed him in a hug while sobbing uncontrollably, muttering words of thanks over and over. Naruto just awkwardly pet her on the head, not knowing what else to do as he planted another explosive note before they left the underground passage and into the sunlight again. Naruto then made a hand seal and sent chakra through his massive chakra string that set off all of his explosive notes within the building. Tsunami had to cover her ears and at the same time cling onto Naruto as she felt the earth rumble from such a massive explosion occurring underground. Tsunami-san, the feudal lord of Wave, who is it? He asked, only then realizing he didn't have a clue who they were. Tsunami frowned in thought before answering truthfully, I'm not sure, as Gato took more control over this country. The original feudal lord fled the country as they had lost their control. Naruto nodded and handed her the larger briefcase of money as well as the deeds to all of the properties, making her eyes widen in shock. Without another warning, Naruto grabbed her and used Shunshin to disappear in a swirl of wind and appear outside her house only to see a boy lying on the ground sobbing. Cousin? He asked, through tears, trying to recognize his mother in the foreign piece of clothing after she was taken not a few hours ago. Tsunami tried her hardest to hold back her tears, but seeing her son alive and unharmed after she was sure she was going to die was too much, and she collapsed on the ground and collected him in a hug. Naruto then cleared his throat to get their attention, which he did. That money I gave you, along with the deeds, is to go to your father who can take the position as mayor or feudal lord or whatever he wants when Gato is gone. He began, you most likely will not see me for a while, so when you see your father again, tell him all I want is the right to receive missions from Wave in the future exclusively should I request them. Farewell, he finished, disappearing in a swirl of wind, leaving the two individuals gaping. Cousin, who was that? Inari asked, still clinging to his mother as if had he let go, she would disappear. That, Inari, is the boy who will rescue us from Gato and who saved your cousin today, he finished, breaking into a fresh wave of tears when she remembered what humiliation she was forced to live through not long ago, though a small smile graced her features when she remembered how they met their end. It was brutal, but they deserved no less. Naruto arrived at the still incomplete bridge that had the signs of a battle. There was a dome of ice mirrors surrounding the Uchiha and Hyuga, whom both looked like pincushions with saban needles seemingly made of ice sticking out of them. From the ice mirrors, Naruto could make out blurs of movement as someone was zinging back and forth between them as they attacked, most likely the boy from yesterday. He had heard of a bloodline that allowed for extreme manipulation of water, to the degree that they could freeze it to make ice or heat it up to make mist. He must be from that bloodline. Further away was Kakashi fighting Momochi Zabuza, and Zabuza seemed to be held down by a bunch of dogs summoned sticking out of the ground while Kakashi readied his jutsu from afar, ready to strike. Seeing Kakashi charge a powerful jutsu with electricity coming out of his hand, Naruto realized he was going for the kill. It seemed that the boy in the mirrors stopped attacking as well, as if sensing his comrade was in trouble. Before Naruto could do anything, an ice mirror appeared in front of Zabuza as the boy stepped out and intercepted the attack by taking it through the lung, stopping it from killing Zabuza. Immediately, the ice mirrors disappeared and the ice Senbon and the two human pin cushions dissolved into water. Staring in shock at the scene, he then narrowed his eyes as he paid attention to what was going on with his highly sensitive hearing. Good tool, Haku. You proved to be useful after all, he finished with a vicious smirk before tossing him aside like a broken kunai and continued to fight with Kakashi. From then on though, it seemed as if it was a one-sided fight. Kakashi cut the tendons in both of Zabuza's arms, causing him to drop his sword and render him pretty much useless. Naruto then sniffed the air and smelt a mixture of alcohol, blood, metal and sweat on the other side of the bridge, as well as hearing a lot of footsteps, like an army was approaching. No wonder his base was virtually empty. He planned on killing Zabuza even if he succeeded, he surmised, realizing Gato must have brought the majority of his mercenaries with him here to finish off the missing Nin. Naruto then focused chakra to every part of his body and used Shunshin to disappear and reappear behind a pillar, still out of everyone's sight, but close enough to begin his attack when he wanted to, and then with a grin, he unsealed one of his favorite puppets from the scroll, Tenchi, not wanting to use his human puppets unless absolutely necessary. Well, what do we have here, Zabuza? And you call yourself a demon? Gato announced imperiously with his army of thugs behind him. What are you doing here, Gato? I have this handled, Zabuza shouted back. Handled? Ha, that Konoha shinobi is about to kill you, Gato explained with a smirk while kicking the body of Haku, who still seemed to be breathing. If not very labored, I never even intended to pay you or your boy toy from the start, Zabu-chan, so it really doesn't matter, he taunted, infuriating Zabuza. You bastard! Yelled Zabuza, before ripping out one of the kunai Kakashi had thrown at him that was still stuck in his arm with his mouth and charged at Gato with incredible speed, yet it was all for naught. Kill him, ordered Gato to his thugs. The thugs hesitated for a bit, under Zabuza's unreal killing intent, but they got their wits back and cut him down, but not after Zabuza had taken down at least 20 of the moronic mercenaries while on his way to Gato. Heh, demon indeed. Well, now that that's over, he began with a cruel smirk. Surrender your life to Zuna-san. I have your daughter at my base where my men are using her as entertainment, he commented with a cruel smirk. Tazuna's face paled in shock and sadness, then it changed to one of absolute fury when the implications sank in. You son of a bastard! I'm gonna kill you if there is one hair on her head harmed. Tazuna yelled with fury, having picked up a loose plan with a large nail in it and charging Gato. He suddenly stopped, however, when something from up above blocked out the sun briefly and cast a shadow on the bridge. By now, everyone's attention was drawn to it, but because of its positioning in front of the sun, no one could make out what it was. From the looks of the shadow, though, it had 6 feathery wings, a small torso and a large waving tail. The thugs started to get unnerved at the sight, and Kakashi unveiled his Sharingan to see chakra strings attached to the figure leading to a pillar close by. But he couldn't do much in his situation. He was already worn out from his fight with Zabuza and was already worried about what he could do against such numbers of bandits. I hope this isn't anything bad. Then a polite and emotionless voice that seemed to be coming from everywhere yet nowhere sounded out across the bridge. Gato-san, it began, sending chills down, said businessman spying your empire has already been destroyed, your entire fortune pilfered and your base destroyed. You no longer have a hostage and she is safe, he began, much to the relief of Tazuna, however. For your actions against her and the populace of Wave Country, your punishment is death. Before Gato, his thugs or Kakashi could react, the figure that was once obscured by the sun moved quickly to a position in front of the army of thugs with their leader and spread its wings wide, with the feathers of the wings all pointed towards the mass of thugs. Then, the chest piece opened up to reveal a small cannon. And now wait a minute, interrupted a terrified Gato who wasn't sure if he should believe his fortune had been stolen from him. I can pay you whatever. He never got to finish though, as Tenchi immediately leapt into action. From each feather of the 6 wings, several hundred Senbon needles were shot out in a cone fashion towards the bandits from each feather, hitting most of them, while small balls with explosive notes on them were shot out of the chest cannon at groups of thugs. The waves of Senbon being shot were so plentiful that they cast a shadow that momentarily blocked the sun like a blanket. From each arm, a powerful flame that rivaled a high-level katan jutsu was being shot out, hurting the bandits in a way so that they would be hit by the Senbon needles. In the midst of this relentless assault, Gato was hiding behind his thugs and trying to escape with his life. Naruto would have none of that though. After all the Senbon and grenades were spent, Tenchi flew over to the retreating form of Gato and with a swing of its massive tail, the puppet eviscerated Gato by swinging its tail upwards from beneath Gato's legs. The man died painfully. By now, Kakashi, who had just recently awoken Hanabi and Sasuke, who were only knocked out by the Senbon their enemy was using, Sakura and Tazuna looked on in awe and shock at the mass scene of destruction. They were so transfixed by the scene that they missed a blur of brown used Shunshin to collect the corpse of one of their enemies, and just as quickly vanish. Naruto appeared on the other side of the bridge with a heavily bleeding boy in his arms and hurried to get away as quickly as possible so he could try and treat the wound before he died. It would be a shame for someone so powerful to die so needlessly, of course. Naruto leaned against a tree as the boy he saved earlier sat next to the bonfire recovering. It had taken nearly all of his chakra reserves to regenerate the cells in the boy's lungs before closing the hole in his chest with the Shosen no Jutsu. He was no medic nin, there were obviously better ways to heal such injuries. It was just thanks to his massive reserves that he could keep it up for so long for it to have an effect. With a few blood replenishing pills and the right application of healing chakra, the healing took nearly 2 hours of constant application of Shosen for it to heal him enough so his body could do the rest. After making him take a soldier pill and taking one himself, he fell into a light sleep against the tree, waiting for the boy to awaken from his slumber. Tsunami had just finished putting her son to bed after the traumatic experience they both had been through when she heard a loud crash coming from downstairs. She let out a shriek, fearing the worst. "Tsunami! Where are you?" yelled the distraught voice of her father, and she immediately let out a sigh of relief. Hearing her scream, though, he immediately found her upstairs with the large gray cloak her savior gave him and nothing else, with puffy red eyes showing that she had been crying heavily. Since she was able to get out before breaking out in sobs again in her father's chest. "Tsunami-chan, I'm here, it's okay," Tazuna muttered in her ear, giving her assurances. "What happened, Tsunami-chan? Can you tell me?" he asked, oblivious to their audience of Konoha shinobi just a few meters away, also wanting to know the same thing. Tsunami then began to retell her nightmarish experience, breaking down in fresh, uncontrollable sobs when she had to explain how those men raped her over and over. Tazuna, too, was now crying with fury and sadness for his daughter's pain while they all sat downstairs at the dinner table as she retold her story. But she began, through sobs as they were doing it, she said the last part in a whisper, as if trying to forget it. "Someone stopped them. He wore this cloak and a straw hat. He just looked at them with glowing red slitted eyes. He didn't sound angry, but what he did to them." Kakashi was now interested. He of course recognized the cloak, and with Tsunami telling them he was wearing a straw hat, he deduced that it must have been the boy they had seen earlier in the week snooping around. "What did he do, Tsunami-san? And is there anything you can tell us about him?" "Anything at all will help us," Kakashi interrupted politely, and he was slightly surprised when she glared at him. "You would try and capture him because he doesn't work for your village? That man is a hero!" she yelled angrily, and Kakashi lifted his arms up in self-defense. "We merely want information, so if this man ever posed a threat to us, we would know some things about him. We have a book for people like him who belong to no village so our shinobi can recognize them and flee if need be." He of course left out the detail about Hunter Nins killing them and taking the bounty, but she didn't need to know that. "Oh, I guess that's all right then." "Well," after interrupting them, she said, viscously, when referring to her rapists he lifted the brim of his hat a bit. "But then my head turned away somehow. I think he did it because whoever looked into his eyes started to scream really loudly and began clawing at their own faces. It looked like they were under some kind of illusion because he didn't do anything to them," she explained, and all shinobi in the room frowned and thought the same thing. Genjutsu. "Eventually, the force making my head looked away vanished, and I saw his eyes. They were red." She didn't get to continue because Sasuke leapt up from the table with a crazed look in his eyes. "Red? What do you mean red? What exactly did they look like? Did he look like me? Did he have 3 black tomo in each eye with red surrounding it? Tell me!" he shouted, and Kakashi restrained him. "I'm sorry, Tsunami-san," he apologized to the shocked Tsunami and the furious Tazuna. "What you just told us is an eerily familiar description of a criminal from our village." Sasuke-kun's brother Sakura looked at her sensei with confusion at hearing this. But Hanabi already knew of the Uchiha massacre that occurred all those years ago, where Uchiha Itachi, Sasuke's brother, killed every single Uchiha before leaving his brother alive and fleeing the village. "Oh, I don't see why he got so worked up. He looked nothing like you when he removed his hat," she said with a frown, which did not placate Sasuke though. "You said he had red eyes. Did they look like this a little?" he asked, activating his Sharingan, which made his onyx eyes turn red with 2 tomo seals around one pupil and one around the other. "No, sorry Uchiha-san, but his eyes were red, but they were red with a black slitted pupil," she explained. Kakashi closed his eyes as a chill crept up his spine. Oh, he remembered eyes like that, 14 years ago on that fateful night when the Kyuubi no Kitsune rampaged through their village. His eyes opened wide with shock then and looked at Tsunami again. "Tsunami-san, can you tell us anything else about his physical appearance?" he asked pleadingly. Tsunami nodded and scrunched her face up in thought before answering. "Well, he had tan skin, long golden blonde hair in a short ponytail, 3 thin tattoo-like whisker marks on each cheek. His hair was kept out of his face with a headband like yours, she said, pointing to Kakashi's forehead protector, but it had a slash going through it. He also had a strange tattoo on his left forearm. It was kanji for 1, 2 and 3. There were other symbols on it, but I couldn't recognize them. When she was done explaining, the genin were all looking at their sensei with confusion as he showed the most emotion he had ever before. His single visible eye was wide in shock, and he had already unconsciously relinquished his hold on Sasuke. Not that it mattered though, because now that he was sure that it wasn't Itachi, he had calmed down. Uzumaki Naruto was all Kakashi said, confusing everyone in the room. Naruto awoke suddenly from his light slumber when he heard coughing nearby. Opening his eyes instantly, he saw that the boy was waking up. Naruto just sat back against a tree, not appearing to be threatening at all as he gained his bearings. "You're awake," Naruto stated, no question in the statement at all. The boy's head snapped in his direction and looked at him with confusion. Naruto had replaced his gray cloak with another one he kept sealed away in his clothing scroll. His hat was still shadowing his eyes while he looked at the boy curiously. "Who are you? Where am I? How did I get here? Where is Zabuza-sama?" he asked all at once, but he stopped when Naruto raised his hand to silence him and halt his questions. "My name is unimportant for now," he began, answering the boy's questions. "You are in a forest not far from the east coast of Fire Country," he continued. "I brought you here after you took a fatal wound to the chest from Hataki-san's jutsu," he explained, as he saw the boy's eyes widen in shock. "Momochi Zabuza was killed when Gato arrived on the bridge to kill him. It would seem he never intended to pay you at all," he finished, answering all his questions. "Zabuza-sama is dead?" the boy asked, sounding distraught. "I no longer have a reason to exist," he continued, reaching for something under his baggy haori, which made Naruto put up his guard. When the boy pulled out a Senbon needle and turned it on himself, as if to kill himself, Naruto didn't waste a second. He used Shunshin to appear beside him immediately and grab his arm. "What are you going?" the boy snarled at Naruto, but the question died in his throat when he saw a pair of glowing red eyes in the shadows of the straw hat the stranger was wearing. "I most certainly did not waste my chakra to heal you. If you are going to kill yourself," he began in a calm voice. Naruto then let go of his arm and sat back down, not before removing all weapons from his person. "What is your name?" Naruto asked, trying to make conversation as he reached into his pouch, making the boy tense. The boy nearly face vaulted though when Naruto pulled out 2 sticks of vanilla Pocky and handed one to him. Thanks," replied the boy, as Naruto nodded, as if he had done the greatest service in the world by handing him one of his own sticks of Pocky to the feminine boy. "My name is Haku," explained the boy, who took a bite of the stick, not really liking it, but seeing how his company seemed to enjoy it so much, he thought better than to insult the sweet. "Uzumaki," Naruto answered the boy before taking another bite of his sweet and continuing. "How did you escape, Haku?" Naruto asked, confusing Haku. "The bloodline purges of Kiri, how did you escape?" Naruto asked, never losing the calm tone of voice, as if he had limitless patience. Began Haku, not sure if he should tell a complete stranger about his past, but seeing as his purpose for existing was gone, he saw no point for secrecy anymore. "Well, I lived in a snowy village in the land of water until my father realized my mother and I had a bloodline limit that allows us to have master control over water and manipulate it with our chakra to make ice. When he realized my mother and I had it, he rallied a mob from the village to come and murder her. After murdering her," he explained, a silent tear sliding down his face, "they turned on me, but I panicked and my bloodline limit protected me by creating several hundred ice needles and killing them first," he explained, as Naruto listened while chewing on this 8th Pocky stick silently, only the crunches from each chew audible. "After that I wandered around the land of water as a beggar until Zabuza-sama found me," he explained with a smile. "He accepted me and gave me a purpose as his tool. He trained me and I became a hunter Nin for Kirigakure before we escaped after a failed coup d'etat," he explained. Naruto nodded before answering. "You're an idiot," he said simply, shocking and angering Haku slightly. "Only you can give yourself a purpose in life. To rely on someone to give you a purpose is a waste of life," he continued, oblivious to Haku's anger. "I grew up in Kanahigakure no Sato where I was hated, beaten and abused because of something I had no control over. We are similar like that," he explained, which made Haku's anger disappear suddenly as he listened. "I was hated because 14 years ago, when the Kyuubi no Kitsune attacked Konoha, it was sealed into my body by the 4th Hokage who had no other choice if he wanted to defeat it. The jutsu he used claimed his life, which only seemed to further the hate the villagers had for me, adding to that of a scapegoat to release their frustrations over that night, for," he continued, oblivious to Haku's eyes widening. "People like me are called Jinchuriki, power of human sacrifice." How appropriate. Haku was now listening intently as Naruto talked. Naruto then proceeded to tell him about how Sasori saved him and trained him to be a shinobi. About how there was an organization of S-class criminals after him, and how he intended to avenge his sensei. To live life as a tool is not living, he began. I saw how you seem to have knowledge of healing and medical jutsu from what I saw in the forest where you were picking medicinal herbs, Naruto explained, shocking Haku at how he wasn't able to detect the boy spying on him. I have acquired some scrolls on medical ninjutsu from various villages, and I could use someone who is versed in medical ninjutsu traveling with me. I could let you learn off those scrolls if you like, along with various ninjutsu you may not know, he explained. Besides, there is strength in numbers, he finished, with a small smile. Haku sat shocked for a moment before smiling and bowing before Naruto. I thank you for saving my life, and I will work my hardest to be useful to you, he began, but stopped when Naruto lifted him up by the front of his shirt and slammed him against a tree, glaring at him with glowing crimson eyes. Haku winced in pain as his wounds had not totally healed yet. Naruto looked into his eyes before speaking. To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment, he began, making Haku's eyes go wide in shock. My sensei taught me that. Naruto then dropped Haku, releasing him so he could lean against the tree as he turned his back to Haku. Tools are weak, they are useless unless wielded. I have no use for a tool, I do have use for a companion. That is something you can be, and I am more than willing to have, he said quietly, yet perfectly loud enough for Haku to hear. Turning his head slightly and grinning at Haku, who smiled a true smile and nodded before taking a kunai Naruto handed him and slashing his Kiri forehead protector. Who the hell is Uzumaki Naruto? Asked Sasuke, wanting to know what his sensei was on about. He used to be a civilian of Konoha, Kakashi began, clearing his head. He was supposed to have been killed almost a decade ago on the night of the Kyuubi festival, Kakashi said, lost in his own thoughts. O2-san, Tsunami called to Tazuna, with a happy look on her face, completely baffling Tazuna. For what possible reason would she be happy? This Uzumaki Naruto told me to give you this, she said, going into another room to bring out 10 large briefcases seemingly filled with cash and some sort of portfolio. Tazuna grabbed the portfolio with a frown and after reading it for several minutes gasped in shock. What is it, Tazuna-san? Asked Tanabe, interested in what he was reading and what this mysterious missing nin had done. These are the deeds for all the shipping companies and dock properties that were owned by Gato for importing and exporting all of them, Tazuna said in shock. Tsunami grinned. Yep, and in those briefcases is approximately 75 billion yen. The other 25 was taken by him though, but that's plenty to bring this country back to economic prosperity. Any? Tazuna spit out the sake he was drinking after having read the documents. San looked to his daughter with tears in his eyes. Are you serious? Tsunami nodded, and before she could respond, Tazuna collected her in a hug, laughing and crying in happiness. It seemed that Wave would be alright after all. Team 7 remained in Wave until the completion of the bridge, whereupon it was named the Great Naruto Bridge, and thanks to the mysterious shinobi that gave them their country back, something Sasuke wasn't all too happy about. After completing the mission and getting the money compensation from Tazuna with a large tip, they headed back to Konoha. It had been roughly 3 months since the fiasco in the Land of Waves, and since he had met Haku, things have been different for Naruto since then. Haku immediately, once realizing they would be traveling together, wanted to get to know each other better, so they knew each other's skills and weaknesses. Naruto had informed him that he wasn't really bad at anything, but he preferred using genjutsu, his puppets, which Naruto showed him, except for his human puppets, and fuinjutsu. He had also told the boy that though some may call it unhealthy, he had a fierce Pocky addiction, to the point where he would constantly carry hundreds of boxes of the delicacy on him at all times. If Haku found that weird, he never said anything. Haku had told him that he preferred medical jutsu and elemental ninjutsu, obviously with his bloodline limit. After giving a demonstration of all of the Hyutan and Suiton jutsu he knew, Naruto began to teach him some of the more advanced Suiton and Futon jutsu he knew. Naruto knew a fair bit of elemental ninjutsu, he just preferred not to use it though, as it consumed too much chakra, thus not allowing him to use the chakra for better purposes, like augmenting his movements. Haku absorbed all the ninjutsu Naruto had to teach him, as well as the ones from scrolls he had stolen from Kiri, Kumo and Suna, which held Suiton, Raiton and Futon jutsu respectively. Haku found that he didn't have much talent for Doton and Katon jutsu as opposed to the other 3 elements, which was fine. What Haku really excelled at though was medical jutsu, and he had nearly began to do backflips when he had shown him the medical scrolls and journals he had acquired from Konoha that were written by the legendary healer Tsunade herself. Naruto was relieved that he had taken an interest in that branch of jutsu, for a healer was always a welcome addition to the team. Naruto also never stopped training his stamina, as he had to keep the physical aspect of his chakra balanced with the spiritual aspect that is constantly being added to his body thanks to the Kyuubi. He wasn't complaining though, it added incentive to constantly train. Now though, Naruto happened on Haku, who took to poisoning different animals, only to heal them with a poison-removing technique he had learned. Of course, the poisons were supplied by yours truly, giving him more experience with the removal of all types of poisons. There weren't many people who knew as much about poisons as him. Naruto watched silently as Haku healed their dinner while munching on a stick of strawberry pocky. After 10 minutes of constant bubbles of green chakra removing black liquids from within the animal, Haku stopped only to watch with a smile as the deer he was healing got up, licking him on the nose, and ran off into the woods. Naruto wondered if the deer would have been so grateful if it realized Haku was the one to poison it in the first place. It seems you are quite proficient with that jutsu, Haku-chan, commented Naruto, much to the annoyance of Haku. Would you please refrain from adding chan to my name? I am a boy, he replied, with a frown, causing Naruto to shrug. Then perhaps you should stop dressing like a girl? It seemed Haku did not appreciate that one bit, and was about to show Naruto why he was so proficient with using Senbon when Naruto interrupted the agitated boy. Our next destination is Konoha, he said simply. Konoha? Haku asked with confusion, knowing that was where Naruto was from. Why? I have received intelligence that the newly developed village Otogekure has formed a secret alliance with Sunagekure, and intend to invade at some point during the Chunin exams, Naruto answered. Haku was shocked at how his partner always seemed to be privy to such information that no one else would be able to happen upon. Whenever he asked how he could always come upon such information, Naruto always answered by saying that Fuinjutsu was a powerful branch of ninjutsu. Not that I mind, but how is that of any concern to us? I would imagine you have cut all ties to that village? Haku asked, still confused. Naruto, while walking away to their campsite, paused long enough to give a piece of information that answered all of Haku's questions. Orochimaru is the Otokichi. Orochimaru. When Naruto had first told him that his main goal for now was to kill the snake Sannin because he was the one to kill his sensei, Haku disapproved, telling him that seeking revenge would not make him happy. Naruto had responded by telling him that it had nothing to do with revenge, more about his sensei's dying wish. Who knows, Haku-chan? Perhaps you can find the man of your dreams once we arrive and take in the sights, he finished before leaving the clearing, loud enough for Haku to hear. One thing Haku could do without was Naruto's weird if a little sarcastic sense of humor. I'm not gay, Naruto! Haku yelled back, knowing it was futile. Haku would never know how the blonde shinobi could aggravate him so easily when he was always so calm and polite. Hatake Kakashi sighed as he eyed his genin team. It had been a few months since the mission in Wave Country, and as soon as he had arrived back home, he had informed the Hokage about the possibility of Naruto still being alive. This of course forced the aged leader of the village to inform the shinobi and civilian council about him, which resulted in Naruto being made an S-class missing nin. He wasn't sure whether to be happy or distraught at that piece of information that they would deem him enough of a threat to be grouped with the likes of Uchiha Itachi and the snake Sannin Orochimaru, or distraught because hunter nin from all over the world will be trying to hunt him for the massive bounty on his head, which was on the same level as Uchiha Itachi, yet still less than Orochimaru. It had only taken 2 weeks for Naruto's profile to be in the bingo book with no picture supplied, seeing as the only people who knew what he looked like were people who had seen him covered with a straw hat. The reason such a matter affected him so was simply, not long after Naruto's supposed death, the Hokage had informed him that Naruto was his old sensei's son, someone who he should have been tasked to looking after. At the time, Kakashi had given him a good piece of his mind and quit Anbu to grieve, which the Hokage didn't dispute at all and only excused his actions by saying that it was his father's wish for no one but the Hokage to know his heritage. Now though, he had another problem to deal with. The council had ordered him to place his team in the Chunin exams so Konoha could flex their proverbial muscles by showing off their genius Uchiha. They didn't much care for the other 2 members of the team, and though he wasn't too worried about Hanabi, the girl being even better at taijutsu than Sasuke, he was worried about Sakura, no matter how annoying the fangirl shinobi wannabe was. Arriving at his team meeting place at the bridge near training ground 3 hours late like normal, he was greeted with the sight of a meditating Hanabi, a brooding Sasuke and a fuming Sakura. "Ohio team," he greeted jovially. "You're late," greeted back the pink-haired banshee of the team. Honestly, you'd think by now she would expect it and arrive late, or at least enjoy his hard thought-out excuses. "Sorry I'm late, but when I went to the bathroom this morning, I had to wrestle an alligator that popped out of the toilet before I could use it, and naturally, it took me the better part of the morning to do," he replied, congratulating himself on coming up with another brilliant, to him, reason for being late. "Liar!" she shrieked again, as if it weren't obvious. "Anyway, I've nominated you 3 for the Chunin exams," he said, while smiling. This caught Sasuke's attention after having a little run-in with a team from Suna who said they were competing in the tournament. Maybe he could test his strength against the redhead one that was leaking killing intent that sent shivers down his spine. Hanabi just nodded while accepting the entrance form her sensei handed her father having already informed her of the possibility earlier that month. Sakura had paled and while shaking, took the entrance form Kakashi had handed to her. She read about the Chunin exams and people could die in them. Suddenly being a shinobi became more real. If you agree to participate, sign those forms and hand them in at the academy in room 301 by noon tomorrow. Ja-ni. With a wave, Kakashi disappeared in a puff of smoke, leaving his team to decide whether they want to participate in the Chunin exams. Are you sure Orochimaru is here? Eh? What makes you so sure? You seem to know a lot about his plans. His plans are obvious. His goal is to learn every jutsu ever known, and he will attempt to do so by obtaining the Sharingan and gaining immortality. There was a pause. From what I've read in your scrolls, he is not an Uchiha. How will he get the Sharingan, and on that issue, how could he become immortal? He does not possess the Sharingan himself, but he has created a Kenjutsu that will allow him to use his soul to occupy another body. If he does this with an Uchiha, he will have access to the Sharingan. He truly is like a snake, shedding his skin whenever it gets old. With a technique like that, you could technically be immortal. The soul never dies. There was another pause. So, he's after the Uchiha I fought in Wave Country not a few months ago. Eh? Aren't you going to stop him? Orochimaru will place the curse seal on the boy. He will not physically take him. I've read about your notes on the curse seal too. How does this relate though, and how do you know so much about it? Looking into the large forest they were standing in for a few moments, he spoke. The curse seal, once applied, forcibly draws all of the chakra and stamina from one's body to allow the user to use much more of their chakra than they usually would be able to, similar to the effects of releasing the 8 celestial gates, thought not as violent. Should the seal be left as is, without being controlled, it will eat away at the target's personality into madness, so, there was a second level created, one that allows the user to control the power. I don't understand, how does this relate to why Uchiha-san will not need to be physically taken? Uchihas are prideful mammals, except for the one traitor. Ironically enough, he will want to control this new power regardless of the cost. There is only one man who can help him control it. He will go to Orochimaru of his own free will so he can use that power, even though there is a way to suppress it. Eh? So that's why you aren't stopping it. He's doing it of his own free will. If he wants to be an idiot, let him be an idiot, I don't care. He is not important, finished Naruto as he heard a scream going through the forest of death, signifying that the snake Sannin had most likely applied his seal on the last loyal Uchiha. Haku, keep an eye out for anyone that might be working with Orochimaru in the forest and destroy any cameras you come across. We must not be seen now that my old village has deemed it prudent to mark me as an S-class criminal for having the audacity to survive a brutal attack by their hands. With a nod signifying he understood, Naruto disappeared using Shunshin, only leaving behind a twirling wind in his wake. Haku likewise melted into the branch he was standing on, leaving only a puddle of water where he once stood and a broken camera. Midarashi Enko was running through the forest of death at top speed where she felt her former sensei's vile chakra. Her subordinates had recently informed her of having found the bodies of 3 dead Kusa shinobi with their faces melted off, the telltale signs of Orochimaru when he takes the shinobi's face as his own. Now, she would exact revenge on the man she hated the most in this world. Even if it killed her. She knew she was going to die if she engaged him like this. But as long as he died too, it didn't much matter. She hated Orochimaru with a passion, for betraying the village she loved, for experimenting on innocents right under her nose, her being one of them, for abandoning her when he left the village to turn traitor, and most of all, for leaving her behind and spitting in her face. She was loyal to her sensei who had become a father figure to her regardless of his misgivings, but all he did was shun her and leave her to the mercy of Konoha, who treated her as they would treat him. A traitor. She hated him for that and would make him pay. If the villagers thought she was guilty of any crime, surely they would change their minds if she used her life to end the one of the true traitor. Orochimaru was speeding through the forest of death with a cruel smirk plastered on his pale features. He had infiltrated the Chunin exams and everything had gone to plan. The whole purpose of this invasion was to mark the Uchiha brat as his next body, then show him why the village he was currently in was weak, giving him more reasons to want to leave. If wanting to control the power of his cursed seal wasn't enough incentive to want to flee this weak village, then surely when he killed his former sensei, the Sandaime Hokage of Konoha, when security was at its tightest, it would open his eyes. As Orochimaru continued to mentally congratulate himself on his ingenious plans, he almost failed to notice the trio of kunai sailing in his direction that would have impacted had his finely tuned senses not heard the whistling sound they made as they traveled through the air. He mentally cursed his inattentiveness that could have gotten him severely injured had his opponent been a little more skilled. He then gracefully landed in the clearing below the branches he was using as a means to travel to meet with his attacker, which only served to amuse him. "Ah, Anko-chan, what a pleasure to see you of all people here, still a failure like you used to be?" he asked, amusement shining through his eyes, though the cruel smirk that many thought was simply the way his lips were shaped was still present on his face. Orochimaru Anko snarled, feeling her anger rising by titanic proportions for every second she was forced to even look at his annoyingly cruel smirk and taunting tone. "Today you die." Orochimaru, clearly amused at his former pupil allowing her anger and fury at him get the better of her, easily dodged her ballistic kunai stripes. Sanaijishu Anko hissed, performing several hand seals and from close range, releasing 6 snakes from the sleeves of her tan trench coat, 3 from each sleeve, and ensnaring her former sensei, who didn't look surprised in the least, opting to continue to smirk at her and not even try to break out. Feeling her anger reaching its peak, she performed some more hand seals, finishing on the Tora seal katan, Ryoka no Jutsu, she announced, before inhaling deeply and blowing out a large breath of fire that ignited the snakes holding her sensei in place, completely incinerating the snake Sannin that was being kept captive under the snake binds. Anko's victory, however, was short-lived when she heard clapping coming from behind her. Spinning around quicker than most would be able to track, Anko spotted Orochimaru leaning against the trunk of a tree while watching her, amusement in his eyes. "You really are a failure, aren't you?" he asked, making Anko see red, but he wasn't done. A mere genin, Orochimaru began, making sure she caught the emphasis on the rank. "Tried that exact same trick on me only moments ago, now I have to put up with Jounin, not to mention a previous student of my own, using such petty and weak," he emphasized again, knowing how to push her buttons, "one of the perks of being Anko's sensei for as long as he was trick against me? Did you honestly expect it to work?" he finished, with an evil-sounding cackle that just sounded downright creepy coming from the mouth of a female Kusa shinobi. Orochimaru really was twisted. Forcefully calming herself down, else she knew she would make a careless mistake, Anko began the hand seals for a technique she had saved just for this man. Many may think Orochimaru to be deranged, slightly touched in the head, a regular megalomaniac, but one thing he most definitely was not was stupid. The serpent-like man immediately recognized what his ex-student planned on doing when he saw helplessness, resignation and resolve flash through her eyes before she started a very familiar set of seals. She intended to use a kenjutsu that he had invented. Was the girl stupid? There was no way he would allow for her to finish using the technique that would summon 2 snakes from her wrists to bite them both, injecting a deadly poison into both of their bodies. He was not going to let this girl kill him. Anko paused in her sealing when she saw her ex-sensei stop smirking and instead frowning at her. That was all the time Orochimaru needed, though. As quicker than she had expected, the man appeared in front of her and planted a fist in her gut. Hard. Orochimaru watched on in amusement as Anko collapsed to the ground, holding her wounded stomach, coughing and wheezing as all the air in her body was forcefully expelled with one strike. In that split second she had dropped her guard to use the suicide jutsu on him. "Kukukuku, you amuse me greatly, Anko-chan," he began, the cruel smirk back on his face. "Did you honestly believe I would allow you to use such a technique on me to begin with? One that I created and taught you? Do you underestimate me so?" Orochimaru asked, enjoying the shame and fury she felt that was clearly visible by her features. "However, I think that your usefulness has finally reached its peak and I should finish what I started all those years ago," said the snake Sannin while raising his right hand in a half seal, activating the cursed seal that he himself had placed on Anko before they parted ways. Anko let out a loud scream of agony as Orochimaru attempted to kill her using the cursed seal. This was it, there was no way she could stop him now. She had known from the start that he could activate it like this and end her, but she honestly hoped her would underestimate her long enough for her to do the suicide technique he had taught her. Everything worked to plan save for the fact that he was able to intercept his technique, now though it was too late, and she could barely think coherently enough to admonish herself for her foolishness. Had Orochimaru not been having so much fun seeing his ex-student being tortured the way she was, he probably would have sensed the incoming presence. However, as it were, he was and he did not. The pain suddenly stopped for Anko, and she wondered if she had already died. That theory changed, however, when she saw Orochimaru leaning against a tree holding his ribs while a stranger stood barely a few meters from her covered in a dark gray cloak and wearing a straw hat. She too, like any other respectable jounin, had read through the most recent edition of the Bingo book, which described in very much detail as much as it could about all of the known missing nins in the shinobi nations, and having read said book, she recognized who this was immediately. The traits were undeniable. Gray cloak, straw hat, and he did look kind of young if his height was any indication of that. This was Uzumaki Naruto, the demon brat of Konoha. Orochimaru, seeing his attacker, glared at him before properly observing him and letting out a sinister chuckle. Kakuku, Naruto-kun, come to avenge your late sensei's death? Taunted Orochimaru, having righted himself from the, admittedly, painful blow the brat landed on him. Enko watched the exchange with interest, irrationally angry at having someone interrupt her while trying to kill Orochimaru and naturally curious about the boy who had the gonads to interrupt Orochimaru, the legendary snake Sannin, from torturing his latest victim. "Aye" was all he said as Enko felt a shiver run down her spine. The kid sounded emotionless. There was no anger, no happiness, no eagerness, no malice, just a simple indifferent answer to a simple question. The kid sounded eerily familiar to another that she once knew and worked with from the Uchiha clan. "Oh? Not trying to avenge poor, deluded Sasori-kun?" Goaded Orochimaru, trying to get this boy to attack him as Enko had, making this much easier on his part. He was not stupid enough to underestimate someone who was trained by someone like Sasori, a known perfectionist. Enko meanwhile was processing the information she just learned at a mile a minute. Sasori? Uzumaki's sensei was someone named Sasori. That name rang a bell, but she just couldn't place it. She decided to just store that piece of information in the back of her mind for later use, and see what would happen from this. "Aye, Orochimaru-san," replied Naruto, with just as much emotion as his last reply had, angering the snake Sannin slightly. This brat reminded him of someone he would gladly kill if he could from his old organization, and suffice to say, he didn't like that brat one bit. Naruto turned his gaze to Enko, who tried to get a look at his features, but they were obscured by a straw hat shadowing his eyes and a high-collared cloak that covered the lower half of his face. "You were foolish, Enko-san, for allowing the anger to get the best of you," he began, making Orochimaru smirk and Enko seethe. "Instead of putting up a fight like a respectable jounin would, your skills were reduced to that of a genin simply because you let anger cloud your judgment. Admittedly," he continued, oblivious to the death glare Enko was directing at him, and the amusement in Orochimaru's eyes. "The man is quite annoying," he finished. Enko and Orochimaru had their opinions of the situation switched, as now it was Enko with humor in her eyes and Orochimaru glaring in his direction with a frown on his face. "What is your purpose here, Naruto-kun?" asked Orochimaru, actually intrigued. He doubted the brat cared at all for Konoha, so he wondered what was motivating him. "To kill you," he responded, as if it was the simplest question in the world. Inwardly, Naruto was amused at how the snake Sannin's eyebrow twitched, showing that his annoyance was finally getting the better of him. It seemed that he wasn't used to people simply being so apathetic towards him. "I thought you didn't want revenge for your sensei's death? You lied?" he countered. The brat was really starting to annoy him, and once he got the information he desired, he would kill him nice and slowly right after he was done with his old student. I didn't lie," answered Naruto truthfully. Though he hated the man for taking his beloved sensei away from him, he didn't let that hate cloud his judgment, or have an impact on his actions. He simply wanted to kill Orochimaru because Sasori asked him to do so. It was the man's dying wish. Who was he to deny it? Of course, saying he wouldn't enjoy fulfilling said wish would be another lie, but who cares? "Not many people would need a particular reason to want to kill you, Orochimaru-san. You are not very likable," he said, earning a snicker from Enko, which she covered when Orochimaru glared at her. Wanting to goad the snake Sannin further, Naruto proceeded to do something that would always aggravate Haku when the two of them sparred. Retracting his hand from his right sleeve, which did not go unnoticed by the other two shinobi present, Naruto reached up his cloak from within and began to unbutton his cloak from the top down to his chest, revealing the bottom half of his face, which Orochimaru and Enko noted was quite neutral, showing none of the emotions both observers were hoping to see. Naruto then replaced his arm in his right sleeve and flicked back the lower left half of his cloak, making Orochimaru tense and Enko pay more attention as she continued to sit on the sidelines and observe, not being able to do much else as Orochimaru's torture made her whole body feel weak and screwed with her control. As Naruto flicked his cloak to the side, his left thigh became visible, which had a kunai holster attached to it. Orochimaru now readied himself for an attack and Enko watched intently, wanting to see what this smart-mouthed and annoyingly indifferent brat was planning to do, but neither expected what he did next. Naruto clicked open the holster and removed a stick of Pocky, banana-flavored, Enko noted, which he then proceeded to place in his mouth and munch. Everything became eerily silent after that, except the sounds of Naruto continuing to munch on the biscuit stick. 1 munch. 2 munches. 3 munches. 4 munches. Enko watched with barely veiled amusement as Orochimaru's eyebrow seemed to twitch in tandem with every munching sound that Naruto made after every chew of his Pocky. Naruto, noticing the anger in Orochimaru's eyes, no matter how much he tried to conceal it, went in for the killing blow. Reaching down to his left thigh holster again, he took out another stick while still chewing on the one in his mouth. he expertly flicked it towards Anko as it landed perfectly in the perplexed girl's mouth. "They're quite good," was all Naruto said, still chewing on his Pocky as Anko stared at him dumbfounded. Naruto could tell Orochimaru was getting increasingly angrier, so he continued with his course of action. Seeing that Anko hadn't started to chew his most generous gift, he narrowed his eyes and looked at her. "Anko-san, it would be in your best interest if you eat that stick of Pocky. Eat it and enjoy it. I don't give them away very often," he said, in a deadly voice, yet it was lost on Anko as he used the deadly voice for such a ridiculous request. Slightly perplexed, she took a slow bite and found herself liking the delicacy. It had nothing on Dango, but this Pocky stuff wasn't bad at all. "Enough of this!" Orochimaru screeched, apparently finally fed up with being ignored. With another burst of speed, Orochimaru launched at Naruto and aimed a punch directly at his face, hoping to crush that accursed sweet and stuff it down his throat. However, as soon as his first was to connect, Naruto's body disintegrated into thousands upon thousands of tiny insects. Orochimaru gasped in shock at the Kyuubi brat proving that he was able to control bugs similarly to the Aburame clan of Konoha. As the bugs that were once Naruto's body flew around the clearing, making visibility of anything outside the blanket they had created quite difficult, Orochimaru leapt back, not wanting to get caught by those damn chakra-sucking bugs. Orochimaru looked around for any signs of his opponent but found none while randomly throwing kunai in the directions he assumed he heard or sensed the brat. He would defeat this annoyance though, like many other Aburame that had tried to cross his path in the past, only to be demolished under his might. Interrupting his train of thoughts, however, was a sharp pain to his lower back that sent him stumbling several feet forward. As he spun around, he saw nothing, only those accursed bugs circling him and buzzing in the most infuriatingly annoying way possible. Once again, though, his thoughts were interrupted as he felt another sharp pain, similar to a punch, connect with his abdomen, but he was certain no one was there. Was this a new jutsu the Aburame had created? Calming himself, he thought to the one thing that the Aburame could not stop, and that was fire. Going through several hand seals, he announced his jutsu. "Katan, Hausenka no Jutsu," he said before bringing his hand up to his mouth and breathing out several dozen small fireballs in all directions as he turned in a clockwise direction, making sure to fire them in all directions and incinerating all of the pests. After completing a full circle though, he was shocked to see that his jutsu did have an effect, but not quite what he had expected. Every bug was on fire, but instead of dropping dead like they should, they were still circling him while their bodies were alit, creating an effect not too different from him being surrounded by a sphere of fire. Were these bugs resistant to fire? It would explain a lot, and not to mention the heat of being surrounded by fire in all directions was starting to affect him, if the sweat on his brow was any indication. Once again, his thoughts were interrupted as he felt 3 almost simultaneous pains occur at once, one in his ribs, the next in his chest, and the last right in his face, sending him flying back into the wall of fire. Orochimaru quickly performed Kawarimi to switch himself with an earth clone he had created while the brat was chewing on his candy and watched with surprise as the inflamed insects created an opening in the wall of fire for his earth clone to sail through so it impacted with the tree. Orochimaru frowned when he saw this, but he decided against re-engaging. His opponent showed skills he did not expect to fight against, and going into a fight without information was simply foolish, so he did the thing he did best. He escaped while his clone impersonated his body flying into a tree, swearing to kill that boy the next time they met. Madarashi Anko was treated to the weirdest and bizarre things she had ever seen. At first, when Orochimaru made the first move and decided to punch the Uzumaki, he appeared right in front of him only to pause when his fist was inches from his face and look around with confusion. All Naruto had done in response to that was staring at his fist, which was inches from his face, before disappearing in a swirl of wind, some kind of shunshin most likely. Orochimaru had then leapt back and started to look around in all directions, as if looking for something before hurling kunai in random directions, completely off target as Naruto was calmly standing on a branch on the opposite side of the clearing, observing what was going on. Naruto then used Shunshin to appear behind Orochimaru and punch him in the spine, which confused her as she was sure Orochimaru would have sensed that. He did when she tried that on him when they sued to spar way back when. Instead, Naruto disappeared with Shunshin again as the snake Sannin whirled around to find nothing. In a surprising and ridiculous move, Orochimaru did a Hausenka, sending the small fireballs that were shot out of his mouth in all directions, barely missing her and scorching the trees surrounding them, yet causing no damage, and he hadn't come close to hitting Naruto once. It was that move and what Naruto did next that showed her what was really going on. Naruto appeared right in front of the Sannin and hit him 3 times, lastly in the face, which sent him flying into a tree. It must have been a genjutsu. There is no other way Orochimaru's senses would be so clouded that he couldn't sense where these strikes were coming from, especially when he seemingly shot his Katan jutsu at nothing. Orochimaru was never wasteful of his chakra, and firing Housenka like that was indeed wasteful. What baffled her most though was that she had never seen Naruto cast a genjutsu, no hand seals at all. Was it when he got the Paki? Did he use it as a distraction? Even if that were the case though, he would only be able to use one-handed seals to cast it then, and a genjutsu that would fool someone on Orochimaru's level to be done using only one-handed seals was absurd at best. Yet, she could honestly come up with no other explanation. He had put Orochimaru under a genjutsu and her old sensei was none the wiser. Just who was this kid? Anko-san, I suggest you'd get your injuries treated, he said, from somewhere above her as Orochimaru's body impacted against the tree and turned to mud. It seems our slithery friend has decided that retreat was his best option, and when a snake does not want to be found, it would be quite difficult to find it, he said, before he too left in a gust of wind. After several moments of silence, Anko struggled to stand, only succeeding with the help the tree provided her. She then replayed the memories of her bizarre encounter with her ex-sensei and Uzumaki Naruto and came to one conclusion. She extremely disliked the brat, and next time she saw him, she would plant a kunai so far up his urethra that by the time she was done with him, he will find aiming while urinating to be pretty much impossible. Haku had decided to silently trail Uchiha Sasuke and his team if he was to find anyone working for Orochimaru at all in the forest. If the Snake Sanin's main goal in his operation in Konoha was to tame the Uchiha, then surely following him would prove useful, though for the first few days of his following and systematically avoiding detection that would no doubt occur if he allowed the surveillance cameras spotted him, nothing much occurred. The Hyuga and the pink-haired girl had to carry the Uchiha around as they continuously changed their camp locations, completely oblivious to his presence. It seemed that when Orochimaru had placed the curse seal on Sasuke, it knocked him out for quite some time as he did not awaken for quite a few days, and when he did, it was quite the scene to say the least. He and Naruto had agreed to meet again after this part of the exam was over on the outskirts of the forest on the northern side near the river, so he had plenty of time to gather information. The first sign of action occurred 2 days after he separated from Naruto when Team 7 tried to make camp to rest after having to haul the Uchiha around while the Hyuga scouted for potential scrolls. Haku was quite relieved that Naruto had taught him about the abilities of the Byakugan and the Sharingan, else he was certain the girl would have spotted him easily with the use of her eyes. The fact was though that Haku continuously stayed out of range of the girl's eyes at all times to avoid detection, which seemed to work, as she had made no signs of having spotted him. However, his observations became infinitely more interesting when the team of 2 conscious and 1 unconscious genin were ambushed by a group of sound genin apparently sent to kill Uchiha Sasuke, which Haku found amusing. Honestly, as if the Odokage would allow for his carefully laid out plans to fail because of some genin under his command, he more than likely sent them to test Sasuke out some more, which Haku was more than willing to just observe. At first, the girl from the Odo team attacked seemingly with genjutsu, which the Hyuga easily saw through. However, the pink-haired one was not as lucky as she was caught by the Oto girl by the hair. The Hyuga, however, proved her worth as a shinobi by quickly and easily disabling the Oto genin with spiky hair that tried to blast her before she could get close enough to him with wind blasts from his arms. The Hyuga easily dodged them and disabled his tenketsu in his arms and legs, rendering him useless. However, the Oto nin that resembled a mummy was not as easily defeated as he used some weird contraption on his arm to make the Hyuga double over in pain. Interesting. As all hope seemed lost, however, a strange green-clad boy with a bowl-cut hairstyle rushed into the clearing and kicked away the mummified Oto genin, while the pink-haired Konoha shinobi freed herself from the hold the sound genin had on her by cutting her hair and falling free from her grasp. Haku continued to watch with interest as the green-clad boy actually seemed to be demolishing the mummified genin up until the point where he performed a double-edged sword technique that slammed the both of them into the ground at high velocities, his opponent coming out of his worse for wear. "That's impossible," Haku heard the green kid say, much to his amusement. It was obvious that he had used chakra to cushion his fall so that he wouldn't receive as much damage, but what really piqued his interest was a spike of foul and vile chakra, a chakra that could be recognized as Orochimaru's. The Uchiha boy seemed to be awake as purple chakra swirled around him like a vortex as black markings went up the left side of his body, covering his face and arm. The boy seemed to have a psychotic grin on his face also while feeling said power course through him. Haku thought it prudent to listen into whatever was happening at that time. "This power," Sasuke muttered to himself, "I feel great." "Sasuke-kun, what's wrong?" asked Sakura tentatively, not sure how to process whatever was happening. "Wrong? Wrong? Nothing's wrong. I feel great," the Uchiha exclaimed before his eyes settled on Sakura. "Sakura, who did this to you?" As Sasuke-kun, the girl stuttered, seemingly afraid of what lay before her. "I'm okay now, there's really no problem," she said, trying to defuse the situation. "I said who did this to you?" the Uchiha snapped, causing Sakura to flinch and point a shaking hand in the direction of the girl of the Odo team. Before said girl could say anything, Sasuke appeared behind her in a burst of speed and punched her with all of his newfound strength. The result was a large cracking sound that caused everyone in the clearing, and those watching, to either wince or pale. Sasuke had punched her in the lower back, most likely breaking it in the process. As the girl collapsed like a puppet that had lost its strings to the ground, Sasuke moved on to his next target, chakra still swirling around him while he basked in its power. Sasuke took slow yet deliberate steps towards the mummified genin who seemed to be contemplating his options. Suddenly, the remaining Otonin who was still able to fight reached into his pouch and produced a scroll. Please let my team and me go, and we'll give you our scroll, he humbly requested, yet Sasuke would have none of it. Why shouldn't I just kill you and eliminate the competition in the process? He countered. Then take the scroll from your dead hands? He asked, a cruel smirk not unlike Orochimaru's on his features.